Chapter 103. Thus, Zhu Yao was at ease and handed this matter over to Wu Song. Only when there were questions regarding formations or mystic arts, would he come and ask her. Zhu Yao began to feel that there were many mystic arts in this world that could be combined with modern knowledge, and the power they could unleash was very shocking. There were many similarities between the two worlds. It was just that this world used immortal techniques to explain things, while her world believed in science. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Yu Luo's cultivation had already reached the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm. The day of the intersect competition had finally arrived. Zhu Yao was actually a little nervous, because in these few days, the reincarnated female antagonist was about to make her dazzling debut. Only on the day of the finals did Zhu Yao finally drag her disciple to the venue. This year's intersect tournament was no different from the previous one. Even the 3 venerable ones were present. One of them sat on the wand, one on the white tiger, and one on the jade lotus. She was the only one who rode on her sword. Did she accidentally drop a level? However, if she were to use the magic tools left behind by her master, she was afraid that it would affect the confidence of others. Of the 3 venerables, the other 2 were not familiar with each other, so they just nodded. Only Feng Yi turned to look at her. Back then, Zhu Yao had even thought that she had seen through something, and her legs had almost turned into jelly. Fortunately, she did not make any other movements. She guessed that her persuasion on that moonlit night had worked. She was now treated as an acquaintance. Zmo probably did not expect that she would come, and when he saw Yu Luo behind her, he was even more stunned. "Little martial uncle, this is..." Zmo stood up, his face was filled with anxiousness. Why did he bring his daughter out? There were so many outsiders today. What if something happened? Zhu Yao realized that the place was already filled with people, so she directly sat on Zmo's seat. Sorry about that, snatching his seat was a tradition of the sect, and I couldn't control myself. Yu Luo greeted Zmo. Then he stood behind her. Zmo was so anxious that he was about to emit smoke. However, there was nothing he could do, so he could only suppress the doubts in his heart. There must be a reason why youngest martial uncle brought his daughter here, right? He was so worried about his precious daughter. The finals of the Qi training competition were taking place below the stage. She still remembered that the last time she came to watch, her master was still by her side. There were also a lot of people whom he couldn't remember clearly. At that time, she felt that the people present were all very powerful, but now she felt that they were all very ordinary. She could even easily see through their flaws. Just as she was feeling bored, she suddenly heard a loud announcement. An elder of Azure Flight sect. Bring your disciples here. Pu Zhu Yao did not sit stably, and had almost fallen off the chair. Azure Flight sect. No way. Everyone present was puzzled as well. The great sect competition was already in its final stages. Why were there still sects coming? It was too late, wasn't it? After all, Zmo was the master. Although he was a little puzzled, he still turned around to welcome him. A group of 5 people flew over from afar. It was a very young man. He looked to be only 15 or 16 years old and had a baby face. His cheeks were chubby, giving one the urge to pinch them. Judging by his cultivation level, he was at the peak of the nascent soul stage. Behind them were 3 men and 1 woman. They were all about 15 or 16 years old and were all at the early stage of foundation establishment. When they flew over, Zhu Yao recognized them. The 4 at the back, weren't they Wu Song and Radish number 2, 3, and 4? But when did Azure Flight sect have a nascent soul elder? Wasn't that place supposed to be a little radish pit? When did an old radish appear? Yet, she did not know. That old radish exchanged a few pleasantries with ZMO. Suddenly, his eyes shone, and he charged straight towards her. He first bowed towards her, and then looked at her with an excited look. Isn't this Sovereign Zhu Yao? I have long heard of your great name. Being able to meet you today is truly the fortune of 3 lifetimes. Zhu Yao reflexively leaned back, and looked at this baby-faced old radish that acted naturally. Who are you? Mistress, Sesame missed you so much. Just as Zhu Yao was puzzled, she heard a familiar voice transmission. Sesame. She looked around, but she did not see any traces of beasts. Mistress, over here, over here. Zhu Yao looked forward, and saw that old radish was blinking his eyes that were about to spasm. Suddenly, she understood something. She sent a voice transmission over. Sesame. Mn. I'm Mistress Beastie, Sesame. The old radish continued to blink. The hell, when did you take on a human form? Why didn't she know about it before? Beastie is at the 10th rank, so of course it can take on a human form. Mistress, I missed you so much. The old radish's face was filled with excitement, as he fiercely widened his eyes at her, looking as though he was about to pounce over and rub against her. Scram! Zhu Yao coldly replied, and his face instantly sank. This elder, I wonder how I should address you. ZMO interrupted just in time. My surname is Xi. Sesame replied with a miserable look. ZMO was startled. Earlier, the sun was still shining brightly. What happened? This elder, Xi, sure was fickle. Elder Xi, are you here to bring your disciples to participate in the intersect tournament? ZMO had never heard of Azure Flight sect, and guessed that they should be from a certain small deity sect. He politely asked. Although all deity sects can participate, the tournament has already reached the finals. If your esteemed sect wishes to participate, I'm afraid you'll have to wait until the next time. It's not like we're here to compete. Sesame confidently replied. Then why the hell did you come here for? The corner of Zmo's lips twitched. Then elder. Of course I'm here to watch. Sesame glanced at Zhu Yao, and after receiving a glare, he weakly changed his words. To watch the show. Ho ho. Elder sure is humorous. If not for the fact that he was a guest, ZMO really did not want to be so courteous with this elder who seemed to have a screw loose. After instructing a disciple to arrange a seat for him, he no longer bothered with him. However, this elder seemed to be especially interested in a demigod stage sovereign, and had even intentionally moved his chair to the side of Senior Marshal Aunt Zhu Yao, looking as though he wanted to strike up a conversation with her with an excited look. ZMO was a little speechless. In the cultivation world, strength was respected, and worshipping the strong seemed to be the nature of every single person. However, it was still rare to see someone like this elder who was so obvious and shameless. Look at that excited face of his, it was basically too shameless. But why did the 4 disciples he brought over so impolitely stand over as well? This was a viewing platform for nascent soul practitioners. Could the rules of Azure Flight sect be like this? Although she had no choice but to harvest a bunch of little turnips, after all, she was still a member of Jade Forest Mountain, and belonged to Ancient Hill sect. With her demigod stage cultivation, it was not impossible for her to establish her own sect. However, if she did that, she would have to leave Ancient Hill sect. This was also the reason why she had never told ZMO about Azure Flight. If he knew about this, he definitely would not dare to chase her out of the sect, but he would definitely bring that bunch of turnips over to Ancient Hill. However, with the aptitudes of those turnips, most probably, they would all be placed in the outer sect, and she was basically unable to take care of all of them. If that was the case, she might as well establish her own sect. However, this pig-brained Sesame. Others were hiding and hiding things, yet, he openly brought people out to wander around blindly. Zhu Yao was so angry that her teeth were aching, yet, she could not show it. "Mistress, are you happy to see Sesame? Are you happy? Are you very surprised?" Seeing Zhu Yao's cold expression, Sesame began to desperately send a voice transmission. "Mistress, the sect already has 4 people who have built their foundation. Isn't Sesame very capable? Mistress, do you want to reward Beastie? Mistress, do you want to give me a hug?" Zhu Yao felt the blood vessels on her head rupturing in an instant. "Shut up. Ms. Person, if you say another word, I will castrate you." Her mind was finally at peace. Zhu Yao rubbed her swollen forehead, glanced at Wu Song at the side, and sent a voice transmission over. "Why did you come to Ancient Hill Sect?" Wu Song was startled for a moment. He looked around, and only then did he realize that Zhu Yao was sending him a voice transmission. His eyes shone, and he replied in his heart. "Elder Sesame said, we have already built our foundation, so it's time for us to come out and see the world, so, as expected, it was that idiot who instigated it. In the future, don't listen to Sesame's blind commands. After all, he's a demonic beast. Though his rank is high, he lacks experience when it comes to human relationships." Wu Song nodded, expressing that he had remembered it. Zhu Yao then understood a few more matters regarding the sect. He, Radish number 2, 3, and 4, had all recently built their foundation. Building their foundation in 5 years, among these 3 or 4 spirit veins, this speed could be considered as flying. And, according to the team Zhu Yao had split them into earlier, these 4 people were all in the same team, and the other member, Radish number 1, was currently in the midst of building his foundation as well. Zhu Yao was a little shocked. This was an unexpected invention. Back then, she had split them into teams, so as to practice their teamwork and use it to defend against enemies. She did not expect that even their cultivation levels could be raised as well. She then asked about the cultivation situation of the other radishes in the teams, and realized that the situation in the teams was the same as well. The cultivation levels of the teams were very similar. This was actually not an occasional phenomenon. Zhu Yao felt that there was a need to personally witness their cultivation situation. "Master, the next match is the finals of Foundation." Yu Luo suddenly spoke up. Zhu Yao took a serious look. As expected, the competition for the Essence group had already ended, and 2 Foundation Paragon disciples were currently flying towards the center of the field. "Oh, then go ahead." Zhu Yao waved her hands. "But I didn't hear my name." Yu Luo's expression was a little anxious. "Oh." Zhu Yao was stunned. "I didn't help you register." "What?" Yu Luo was a little dumbfounded. What happened to letting her participate? "Just go ahead," Zhu Yao said without a care. Things like registering were so troublesome. "But there are already 2 people on the field." "Then let's fight a pair." "Go." "It's their turn." Yu Luo was silent for a moment. Glancing at the field, as though she had decided on something, she heavily said, "Yes." After saying that, she immediately flew towards the center of the field. Zhu Yao nodded satisfyingly. Her disciple had to be this domineering, cool, and arrogant. What championship? Couldn't she just defeat the strongest person? Chapter 104. Senior Marshal and Yu Luo. One of them was coincidentally a disciple of Ancient Hill Sect, and recognized her. "What's wrong with you?" Yu Luo did not reply. She simply swept a glance at the 2 of them, and coldly said, "Make your move." The 2 of them were startled, yet, they did not know what to do. Could it be that the situation of the finals this time had changed? Why didn't they know? Zmo seemed to have seen Yuluo the moment she flew down the stage, and stood up with an excited expression. Yuluo! His precious daughter, what was she trying to do? Just as he was about to berate her, he suddenly felt a pressure pressing him back to his seat. Zmo turned to look behind him. Little martial ant. Why did she stop him? Zhu Yao did not even give him any explanation, and simply looked at the stage seriously, as though the person who was pressuring him was not her. What was little martial ant trying to do? Although his daughter was a foundation stage practitioner as well, with her trashy water spirit vein, how could she defeat the two disciples on the stage? Furthermore, the opponents were foundation paragons. Zmo was instantly anxious, yet, he could not move at all. Senior Martial Ant Yuluo must have entered by mistake. As a disciple of Ancient Hill sect, he knew about this martial ant with a trashy spirit vein, and did not think that she had the strength to participate in the tournament. It's best if you leave first. Yuluo's expression turned cold. She could not be bothered to waste words with the two of them, and immediately formed hand seals. A world of ice and snow was released. The ground instantly froze at an extremely fast speed. Pillars of ice shot out from the ground like steel nails, split into two, and shot straight towards the other two. The two of them were startled. The speed at which the ice formed was so fast that they did not even have the time to form a defensive barrier, and had no choice but to fly up with their flying swords. Senior Martial Ant Yuluo. Especially that Ancient Hill sect disciple. His face was filled with disbelief. Was this the water spirit vein? You must be joking. This casting speed was simply comparable to a mutated ice spirit vein, all right? Just as he was feeling doubtful, Yuluo suddenly leaped up, and slashed towards him with her sword. He no longer had the time to be shocked. Keeping away his scornful thoughts from before, he summoned his spiritual sword and faced her seriously. The other disciple saw that she was attacking someone else, and had a moment to catch his breath. He flew down, intending to counterattack. However, the moment he landed on the ground, he felt something was amiss. The person casting the art was no longer there. Logically, the spell should have stopped, but the ice on the ground was still spreading. The moment he landed on the ground, it froze one of his legs. That person was startled and immediately swung his sword to cut off the ice. With one of his feet stuck in ice, he flew up again. He took a closer look. That was the art of freezing. It actually formed a huge spell formation that covered the entire place. Furthermore, it was continuously activated. As soon as someone touched the ground, they would be frozen into ice in no time. In less than 10 breaths of time, she had actually controlled the entire ground. Startled, he instantly turned serious. He had thought that this female cultivator was a little arrogant. At this moment, it seemed that she dared to challenge the two of them alone. He must have the strength to do so. And the other Ancient Hill sect disciple was also dumbfounded by Yuluo's sword arts that could penetrate through any openings. Sword after sword. It was as if he was fighting with his life on the line, slashing and stabbing randomly. However, he was unable to retaliate at all. Gradually, he found it difficult to even parry the attacks. Such a brutal sword technique, it was definitely not the rumored trash master Yuluo. Taking a deep breath, he circulated the spiritual energy in his body. With all his might, he forced Yuluo away. The suppression of a foundation paragon against a mid-level foundation practitioner caused Yuluo to be forced to retreat by several meters. The disciple was overjoyed. Taking the opportunity when she retreated, he materialized thousands of spiritual swords and attacked Yuluo. Yuluo had lost the initiative, and was no longer able to get close, and could only be forced to retreat. And she dodged from the air all the way to the ground. A good chance. The eyes of the other disciple shone. He immediately circulated his spiritual energy, and cast a fire mystic art, Prairie Blaze. A large amount of flames ignited on the surface of the ice, instantly turning into a sea of fire. And the ice surface earlier was burned by the flames as well, instantly turning into water vapor, revealing the original ground. And the disciple who was controlling the spiritual swords, hurriedly adjusted the direction of the spiritual swords, and attacked towards Yuluo's direction. Yuluo had no choice but to raise a defensive barrier, and did her best to resist the surrounding sea of fire, and the spiritual swords that were descending from above. The situation instantly reversed. Yuluo completely did not have any strength to retaliate, and the destruction of that defensive barrier was only a matter of time. The eyes of the two disciples revealed joyous expressions, yet, they silently expressed their pity towards this woman who dared to come out and fight against two alone. Her ability was indeed not bad, but unfortunately, she was still a little too arrogant. How could it be that easy to challenge someone of a higher level, and furthermore, it was a 1 versus 2. The two of them landed on the ground, and looked towards Yuluo's direction. The mystic arts in their hands, however, did not stop. The two of them increased the output of their spiritual energy, hoping to break through her defensive barrier as soon as possible. There was no longer any suspense in the outcome, they were definitely going to win. Yuluo seemed to be unable to hold on any longer, as she knelt on the ground on one knee. Looking at the two complacent people, she suddenly revealed a smile. Before the two of them had even noticed, she had already slammed her palm onto the ground, and said, "Freeze, activate." In an instant, a large amount of ice appeared where the two of them were standing, and covered their bodies, instantly turning the two of them into two gigantic ice sculptures. And they still maintained the posture of forming the hand seals just now. Victory! The entire place was silent. It was supposed to be a sure win. How did the tables turn so quickly? Not to mention the two participants, even the nascent soul cultivators present didn't expect this outcome. Most of these people were present when Yuluo's spirit root was tested back then, so of course they knew that the little girl on the field was the water spirit root's human cauldron back then. Therefore, they were more unwilling to believe their own eyes than anyone else. Didn't they say that trash spirit roots could only be used as cultivation furnaces? This must have been a mistake in the past, right? This girl actually has an ice spirit root, right? It was one thing to challenge someone of a higher level, but 1 against 2. Well done. ZMO was undoubtedly the happiest one, and the only thing missing was to rush up and give his precious daughter a kiss. Let's see who dares to look down on my daughter in the future. Let's see which rascal dares to propose marriage without fear of death. ZMO barely managed to stabilize his excited emotions, and he still remembered to turn around to thank Xu Yao. Naturally, he knew that the reason why his daughter could have such accomplishments was definitely because of his senior martial aunt's teachings. In the past, he thought that his martial aunt was mischievous and liked to go against him. But now, it seemed that she had already thought of this. Thank you, martial uncle, for teaching my daughter. Touching. As expected, they were a family that loved each other. Xu Yao gave him a disdainful look. Little bitch, when I stopped you earlier, you must have been scolding me in your heart. Now that you know what I mean, I'm going to ignore you. Xu Yao turned around, and continued her cold and aloof demeanor. ZMO was snubbed, yet, he did not mind it, and happily sat back down. However, his words reminded the crowd present, and only then did they recall that Water Spirit Vein Holder was Sovereign Xu Yao's disciple, and she came from Jade Forest Mountain. It was no wonder she was so monstrous. As expected, Jade Forest Mountain was a place that specialized in producing monstrous people, and could not be deduced with common sense. However, earlier, just how did that Yu Yao instantly form a formation, and froze those two people? Only Xu Yao knew the answer to this. The hell, Little Radish basically did not set up a second formation, all right. It was that stupid disciple. She thought that by using fire to melt the ice, she would be able to break the formation. However, when water encounters fire, it can only turn into water vapor. Once the temperature drops, of course, it can turn back into ice. That formation had never disappeared in the first place, all right. What Little Radish did was merely to once again freeze them into ice. As expected, knowledge can change one's fate. The reason why those two people lost was because they lacked a physics teacher. Just when the crowd was still confused, Feng Yi, who had been sitting on the lawn the entire time, looked towards the remnants of the formation on the ground. She looked at Zhu Yao in front of her as though she was in deep thoughts, and in an instant, she once again returned to her usual appearance. As expected, it's still because she missed him too much, right? Jade Forest Mountain, Yu Yao wins. The judge at the side of the arena loudly announced. Yu Yao raised her head and glanced at her master who was on the stage, and revealed the most brilliant smile in these 20 years. Master, your disciple did it. In the next instant, however, she fell straight onto the ground, and the hint of a smile still remained at the corner of her lips. Zhu Yao simply felt her heart tremble, and for a moment, she had a bad premonition. The judge thought that she had merely fainted after exhausting her spiritual energy, so he did not care about her, and instead prioritized saving the two disciples who were still frozen in ice. With a flash of white light, Sovereign Zhu Yao, who was still on the stage earlier, suddenly appeared in the arena, and held on to Yu Yao. Just as the judge was about to sigh, the deep relationship between master and disciple, he saw that sovereign loudly recite. The hell? Looking at the bug word that was becoming deeper and deeper on Yu Yao's face, Zhu Yao even had the heart to curse out. The hell, why did it have to be now? Wasn't it supposed to be tomorrow night? Why did it have to begin now? No, she definitely could not allow that female antagonist to successfully take over her body. She was raising a little radish with red shoots, she could not turn into a black radish. Zhu Yao carried Yu Yao, who had already fainted, and flew up. She then casually picked up CMO, who was still showing off how amazing his daughter was on the stage, and returned to Jade Forest Mountain with her fastest speed. Little martial ant. ZMO was confused. Why did she suddenly take him away? Seeing her anxiously placing his daughter on the bed, ZMO heaved a sigh of relief, and said, Senior Martial Ant, don't worry. My daughter is just tired, and wants to rest for a while, she's being taken over by someone. Zhu Yao coldly said. What? Zmo's face paled, and for a moment, even his voice was trembling a little. How's that possible? I basically did not sense the presence of any other nascent soul practitioners. In order to take over a body, one must first cultivate to the nascent soul level, otherwise, it was basically impossible for the soul to leave the body on its own. Zhu Yao coldly glared at him. What kind of father are you? ZMO was a little flustered as well. He seriously looked at his daughter's appearance, and indeed, it was a little abnormal. Her presence seemed to be growing weaker. Could it be that there really was a nascent soul devouring her soul? What should we do? If I knew, do I still need to capture you? Zhu Yao glared at him. Outsiders would not be able to help with matters like this. The so-called taking over a body, in the end, was just a contest between two souls. Something like a soul was illusory, outsiders were basically unable to do anything about it, and they could only see who had more will to continue living. Chapter 105. This was also the reason why in so many years, Zhu Yao desperately improved the water mystic arts, and instilled various concepts of self-improvement into Little Radish, so as to eliminate the inferiority she felt towards her water spirit vein. Furthermore, He even allowed her to participate in the intersect tournament to build up her confidence. However, she did not expect that the female antagonist would choose this time to possess Little Radish. Little Radish had just gone through a great battle, and his spiritual energy and mental energy were at their weakest. Clearly, the time indicated in the dream was tomorrow night, so this advance notice was basically inaccurate. Junior Marshal Nephew ZMO, you're her father, so your position in her heart is definitely not ordinary. Call her out more often. Perhaps when she hears your voice, she will gain some strength. Right now, she could only try her best. She remembered that in modern times, there were many patients who became vegetative due to various reasons. They would respond to the call of their loved ones, which could awaken their subconscious, and there were even cases where they slowly recovered. Perhaps this method would be useful in the world of cultivators. When ZMO heard this, he immediately called out to his daughter from the bedside, and said various words of encouragement. He talked all the way until sunset. Zhu Yao anxiously looked at Yu Luo's reaction, however, she could only see the word bug on her face, continuing to darken, as though it was about to turn into a deep black color like the first time she met Xiao Yi. If this continued, before daybreak, Yu Luo's soul would be completely devoured. Could it be that the female antagonist's rebirth was irreversible? The hell, I don't believe it. Why is it that the little radish that I've raised with my own hands is going to be taken by this black radish? Protect me. Zhu Yao pulled ZMO away, supported Yu Luo who was lying on the bed, and sat cross-legged behind her. Let me enter her divine sense to take a look. Martial uncle, the divine sense is no small matter, and my daughter is currently unconscious. If we force our way in, I'm afraid Martial uncle will also be injured. I can't care so much anymore. Radish was about to die, so she could only give it a try. Zhu Yao closed her eyes, separated a strand of her divine sense, and entered Yu Yao's forehead. As expected, the moment it came into contact with her divine sense, it was blocked by a huge force. Zhu Yao focused and desperately drilled in. Finally, there was an opening. He entered her divine sense. As soon as she entered, she was stunned by the scene inside. It should have been a clear divine sense, but now it was dark. At the top, there were two masses of gas, one white and one black. Only a small part of it was left. Meanwhile, the black figure was swallowing the white gas mouthful by mouthful. Every time it devoured a portion, the blackness grew a little stronger. The spiritual sense space also became a bit dimmer. Fuck, bitch. Zhu Yao could not help but curse at that lump of black cloud. It meant that Little Radish's white ball did not have much left. Little Radish, listen carefully. If you're fucking eaten by someone else, you're not my disciple. The white ball that was obediently being swallowed seemed to pause for a moment, and a puzzled voice sounded. Master. If you know it's me, then wake up. Zhu Yao loudly shouted. The things this old lady has taught you for the past 20 years, where have you learned them all? Are you really willing to be eaten by someone else? The white blob paused even more visibly, and even its movement of being swallowed stopped. Little Radish, you've been working so hard for so many years. You've been practicing spells with all your might every day. Is it because you want to give your body to this spirit of unknown origin? Of course, not. Then why didn't you resist? Do you still remember what you told me back then when I was teaching you ice-type mystic arts? I want to become strong. And then, to prove that I'm not trash. You've given up. Or were you just lying to Master back then? Of course not. Little Radish's voice suddenly became firm, and even that little white ball had instantly become a lot brighter. Zhu Yao smiled. She finally had the will to fight. Then prove it to Master. Don't lose to this spirit that came from God knows where. You're my, Zhu Yao's, only disciple. The people of my Jade Forest Mountain have always bullied others. When will it ever be someone else's turn to bully us? Yes. Yu Yao loudly replied. In an instant, as though that white ball had been lit up, it emitted out a blinding white light. And that light seemed to be contagious, as it spread towards the direction of that deep darkness. That black ball seemed to have seen through the original owner's resistance, as it swallowed even faster. For a moment, the two sides were in a stalemate, and it seemed like they were evenly matched. Zhu Yao had no choice but to add fuel to the fire. Little Radish, if you lose today, don't ever say that you're a disciple of Jade Forest Mountain. As expected, that white ball seemed to have suddenly gained strength, as it immediately forced the black ball back, and it even swallowed it back. With an ah-hoot sound, it took a huge bite out of the other party. Just as it was about to continue swallowing, suddenly, a black hole appeared above the black cloud. The black cloud that was bitten to the point where half of it was left hid inside, and instantly disappeared without a trace. The hell, it was no wonder she did not sense the presence of a nascent soul. It turned out that the other party had directly appeared in Little Radish's divine sense. Master. Little Radish finally opened her eyes, however, she seemed to be so tired that she only had one breath left. It's fine now, sleep. Zhu Yao helped her to lie down, stroked her head, and gave her a reassuring gaze. Only then did she fall into a deep sleep. Zhu Yao once again looked at the person on the bed. The bug mark on her face had already completely disappeared. It seemed like her grooming plan this time could be considered a success. She gave ZMO a look, and then, the two of them quietly left the room. Thank you, Senior Marshal Ant, for saving me. ZMO gave her a deep bow, and only then did he heave a heavy sigh of relief. He wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead, and the corners of his eyes that were moist. Earlier, I had thought that my daughter was. Fortunately, Senior Marshal Ant and my daughter are both fine. Pooh, ZMO still wanted to say something, however, Zhu Yao suddenly opened her mouth, and spat out a mouthful of blood on his face. Senior Marshal Ant. The hell, as expected, her master and whatnot were all lies. What happened to the promised separation of divine sense was an essential skill for demigods. Clearly, her master had done it properly back then, so why was his reaction so huge when it was her turn? This old lady here is going to die from the pain. The result of the first separation of divine sense, Zhu Yao laid on the bed for 3 whole days. When she woke up, the first person she saw was actually Feng Yi, who had a worried look on her face. Zhu Yao did not pay attention, and had almost fallen off the bed. Senior Marshal's sister. Feng Yi, why are you here? The hell, she couldn't have seen through anything, right? Zhu Yao instantly tensed up. Her muddled emotions earlier instantly cleared up by a large half. Feng Yi, however, had a calm look, as she replied. She's already fine. Only then did Zhu Yao see ZMO who was standing behind her. He explained the situation. So that day, after she puked out blood, she fainted. Naturally, ZMO did not know what happened, and could only bring her straight to the beast-taming mountain, to have Feng Yi, who was also a demigod, check on her situation. But fortunately, other than losing a little bit of spiritual energy, everything else was normal. However, Little Radish had yet to wake up. Probably because of the possession, her primordial spirit was still damaged a little, and she needed a period of time to recover. Zhu Yao never expected that a simple separation of divine sense would actually consume such a huge amount of energy. Back then, when her master secretly followed her to Tasioluk, she basically did not see any adverse reactions from him, right? As expected, comparisons were odious. ZMO was planning to continue chatting with her about Yu Yao's situation, however, a disciple suddenly walked in. He said that an elder of Celestial Indus sect was requesting an audience, and had important matters to discuss. But strangely, the person this elder requested an audience with was not ZMO, but her. Celestial Indus sect. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment. Why was this name so familiar? Celestial Indus sect is located to the south of Ancient Hill sect, and is a deity sect that is second only to my sect. ZMO explained. The disciples of this sect have always been proficient in music, and are proficient in using music to subdue their enemies. I wonder how Senior Martial Ant got acquainted with this elder. I don't know him. She simply felt that the three words Celestial Indus sect sounded a little familiar. ZMO was startled as well. Since they did not know each other, then why did he specifically request to meet her? Harboring suspicions, the two of them bade farewell to Feng Yi, and headed to the side hall of the main mountain. ZMO first served her some tea, before letting the disciple bring that elder in. The person who came was a youth around 20 years old. However, looking at his bearing, and the spiritual energy surrounding his body, he must be a nascent soul paragon practitioner who had cultivated for thousands of years. In the deity cultivation world, one's age could not be determined based on one's appearance. Even nascent soul practitioners were able to reconstruct their own appearances. After all, not everyone was like CMO, who liked to make himself look like an old man. Celestial Indus sect's Chi Han greets sovereign. That person reported his sect, and bowed. Only then did Zhu Yao recall why Celestial Indus sect felt so familiar. Wasn't this Chi Han the master of that female antagonist Mu Mei Yen in her dreams? It was just that in the dream, he had already broken through to the soul formation stage, but now he was only at the nascent soul stage. She had just helped Little Radish chase away the disciple who wanted to take over her body, so why did her master come knocking on her door so quickly? Zhu Yao nodded perfunctorily. Feeling that she had to suppress her shock, she picked up the teacup on the table and took a huge gulp. However, Chi Han did not mind it too much. He simply moved his body to the side, and signaled for a disciple behind him to step forward. Rulu, hurry up and pay your respects to the sovereign. That disciple immediately stepped forward. Greetings, Supremacy. Lowering his head, he cupped his fists and solemnly bowed towards Zhu Yao. A standard 90-degree bow. After pausing for a moment, he raised his head, revealing a face with the word bug written on it. Zhu Yao's mouthful of spiritual tea, sprayed it all over her face. A beautiful young girl was instantly sprayed with tea leaves all over her face. The room instantly fell silent. Chi Han, disciple, Zhu Yao, Senior Martial Ant, you. Zimo's face was filled with awkwardness as well. Even if he was beaten to death, he would never have thought that his Senior Martial Ant would do something like this. Even if she disliked his disciple, there was no need to express it in front of his elder, right? How was he going to clean up this mess? Chapter 106. Did it have to be so exciting? He had just saved Little Radish, why did another bug appear? Could it be that this thing was constantly being refreshed? ZMO silently cast a scornful glance at her. It would be strange if anyone would believe such words, right? Sovereign, are you serious? Chi Han's eyes instantly shone, and his eyes were filled with starlight. Damn, there were actually people who believed it. The Venerable One is indeed capable. Chi Han flattered with a joyous expression. To tell you the truth, this woman is the daughter of our Celestial Indus sect master, and her name is Rulu. Just like Venerable One's disciple, he also has a single water spirit root. Nanny. When did the water spirit root become so popular? ZMO and Zhu Yao were both dumbfounded, as they stared fixedly at that female disciple. However, the woman didn't seem embarrassed at all. She openly allowed the two of them to examine her. Well, if it wasn't for the fact that she had a tea-stained face. Zhu Yao faintly sensed that there was something wrong with her gaze. Logically speaking, when a little girl was being stared at like that, no matter how calm she was, she would still feel a little nervous. However, she looked as though she was used to it, let alone having feelings of inferiority. If it wasn't for the 3 letters, bug, on her face, she would have thought that she was a good, upright radish. Wait, why are there other symbols on her face? Why was there a bracket under the bug? What was the meaning of the word rebirth in there? Zhu Yao suddenly recalled the lump of black miasma that escaped from Little Radish's divine sense yesterday. Could it be that the female antagonist yesterday did not manage to seize Little Radish's body, and seized this body instead? Fuck, is this person's soul a phone? Call transfer is popular for possession. He was so tired. I feel like I will never love again. Sovereign Zhu Yao. Qi Han said with an expectant look. Since Sovereign is able to see through Rulu with a single glance, it proves that you are fated to meet her. I wonder if you have any thoughts of taking her in as your disciple? No. Zhu Yao immediately retracted her cold and aloof mask. What kind of joke was this? Just by looking at the blackened letters on her face, she could tell that this radish was already beyond saving. How could she still dare to keep it by her side? Qi Han was startled, as though he never expected that she would actually reject him so thoroughly. Then just now, the Venerable One was. I just said it casually. What do you think is real? Qi Han, did you spit the tea out just like that? Qi Han felt a deep sense of powerlessness. ZMO stepped forward and patted on his shoulder, and gave him an understanding look. Brother, you understand my pain now, right? Everyone who came from Jade Forest Mountain is like this. Venerable One. In this world, there were many misconceptions about water-type spiritual roots. Only your mystic arts. Qi Han still wanted to give it a try. Zhu Yao, however, immediately interrupted her words. She doesn't have a water spirit root. Even if it's not. What? Qi Han was startled. Not the water spirit vein. What did he mean? ZMO, however, was the first to react. Immediately, he summoned a spirit vein testing crystal ball, and looked at the female disciple Qi Han brought over. The disciple did not dodge. He placed his hand on the crystal ball. Not long after, a white mist rose from the crystal ball and snowflakes flew into the air. Single eye spirit vein. ZMO widened his eyes. This was a supremely good quality, after all. ZMO's expression turned cold, and filled with resentment, he looked towards Qi Han at the side. And to think that earlier, he had thought that the other party had suffered the same fate as his own daughter, and was planning to help persuade his senior martial uncle. Where's the water spirit root? Are you kidding me? Qi Han was a little embarrassed as well, but more than that, he was pleasantly surprised. Rulu, this is what I wanted to tell you this morning. Rulu said with an apologetic look. My spirit vein has mutated. However, senior martial uncle, you left too quickly, and didn't give me the chance to explain, so, you child. In the end, she was his senior martial brother's daughter, so Qi Han couldn't really blame her too harshly. Senior martial uncle, please forgive me. Rulu once again apologized. However, that apology did not reach the bottom of her eyes. A strange glint flashed past her gentle eyes, and Zhu Yao, who was at the side, saw it. As expected, this person was that reincarnated female antagonist, Mu Meiyin, right? Qi Han once again apologized to the two of them seriously, but he did not mention the matter of taking Rulu as his disciple. What a joke. The ice spirit vein was a mutated heavenly spirit vein. In the entire cultivation world, this kind of aptitude was rarely seen even in 10,000 years, so how could he possibly hand it over to someone else? Earlier, he had simply watched Yuluo's match, and thought that Yulin Mountain had some sort of special method to obtain the water spirit vein. Hence, he wanted to conveniently let her enter Ancient Hill's sect, just to seek protection. Now, naturally, he no longer had to be afraid. Naturally, ZMO would not really go along with his plan either. Putting himself in their shoes, he himself had a daughter with the water spirit vein as well, so he could understand their hearts of making plans for their daughters. I wonder why Reverend has come today. ZMO finally asked the main topic. Chi-Han frowned, as though he had recalled something troublesome. He carefully glanced at Zhu Yao, and then said, "It's like this. This humble one has a daughter of an old friend. Due to a mishap in her family, she was heavily injured by someone, and her divine sense was injured. I sealed her in ice, and then, I used spiritual energy to nurse her back. However, her aura is becoming weaker and weaker. I've always heard that Sovereign of Jade Forest Mountain knows a lot about divine sense, so I wish to invite Sovereign to come out of seclusion and take a look." When these words fell, Zhu Yao did not mind at all, but ZMO frowned. It had always been normal for righteous sects to help each other out with small matters. If he were to bring the person over, ZMO would not forcefully stop him from seeing her either. However, hearing the meaning behind his words, he actually wanted her to rush over to see her illness. Wasn't he looking down on her a little too much? Chi-Han saw that ZMO's expression had turned ugly, and hurriedly explained. "That disciple of mine is heavily injured. Currently, she is frozen in one place, and is unable to move around as she pleases. That's why I'm shamelessly requesting Sovereign to go with me." Chi-Han turned to look at Zhu Yao, whose face was still ice-cold. For a moment, he was unable to confirm if this Sovereign, who did not act according to logic, would agree to it. "Sure." Zhu Yao nodded indifferently. She was just fretting over not having the chance to understand that new bug. "But, we'll have to wait until my disciple wakes up first." Chi-Han's expression turned joyous, and hurriedly thanked her. ZMO said a few courteous words, and then, sent them off. Zhu Yao could sense Chi-Han's excited emotions when he left, even his footsteps were light and quick. However, that young girl called Rulu, no, she should be called Mu Meiyan. She followed Chi-Han with an obedient look, yet, her eyes were staring straight at his back. That gaze, however, made Zhu Yao feel extremely strange. If it was hatred, it wasn't. If it was love, it didn't seem like it either. It was as though there were too many things mixed in, causing people to be unable to see through it. Zhu Yao understood the hatred she felt from dying a tragic death in her previous life. However, she was unable to understand why she had to possess others to harm others, in order to achieve her revenge. That was why she tried her best to stop Little Radish from being possessed by her. However, who would have known that she was unable to possess him, and in the blink of an eye, found the next one, causing her to be busy for so many years, all for nothing. After taking a huge detour, she returned to the starting point. The bug word on her face was evidently impossible to ignore. This was proof that, even without Wusong's demonic physique, she was still the fuse that could trigger the end of the world. Zhu Yao once again glanced at that young girl, and suddenly, she was startled. Were her eyes playing tricks on her? Why did she feel as though there was a black shadow sticking closely to her from behind? Zhu Yao took a closer look, and there was nothing there again. What was going on? Only after walking far away from the side hall, did Mu Meiyan turn her head back to look. On her initially innocent face, a hint of ruthlessness instantly flashed past. She silently sent a voice transmission in her heart. That Sovereign is that person with divine sense earlier. She can't be, don't worry, it's definitely impossible. An extremely enchanting voice resounded in her heart. How can a mere demigod be able to see through us with a single glance? Furthermore, she would never have expected that we would dare to appear in front of her so openly in such a short period of time. But if we don't get rid of this person, what if she sees through something? Ho ho, no rush. I don't think she has the ability to do so. And a certain person who definitely had the ability, and had long seen through them, was currently kicking open her disciple's room door, making a grand entrance. Little Radish, I'm back. The two figures that were sticking closely to each other at the head of the bed, instantly separated. Especially the man who was sitting at the head of the bed, he even stood up with a flustered look. He began to explain in a fluster. Sect master, I. It was Elder Sesame who brought me here to find you. What should she say? Did JQ always have to expose her? Zhu Yao narrowed her eyes. She did not speak, and simply coldly stared at Wu Song, who was currently holding onto an empty cup. I. Under her intense gaze, Wu Song weakly lowered his head. His face was completely red, and a moment later, he squeezed out a sentence. I'll go find Elder Sesame. As though he was flying, he sprinted out of the room. Hey, I haven't even said anything yet. Hence, Zhuya once again turned her head, and stared at her disciple who was currently leaning against the wall. There's nothing between us. Yu Yao loudly said. Zhu Yao silently tilted her head. Did I say anything? Yu Yao's face reddened, as she stubbornly refused to admit her mistake. In any case, it's not like what you're thinking. What am I thinking? Zhu Yao smiled. Master. Yu Yao's face was filled with embarrassment, as she looked at her with resentment. Zhu Yao could only let out a long sigh. Ha, a grown girl can't be kept at home. I'm your disciple. A grown girl can't be kept at home. Yu Yao angrily pulled onto the blanket, turned her head around, and ignored her. Zhu Yao once again sighed. Staying at home will turn into enmity. Master. I know, I'll leave now. Zhu Yao slipped away. If she continued teasing, her disciple was going to flip out. If Little Radish couldn't get anything out of her, couldn't she just go and force Wu Song? Oh ho, gossiping and whatnot, she had a lot of experience. After a series of threats, Wu Song honestly confessed the entire process of his crime. Actually, it was because on the day of the finals, she suddenly carried Little Radish and left, and she even pulled along the sect master of Ancient Hill's sect who was in charge of the event. They were worried that something might have happened, and thus, they waited for news in Ancient Hill's sect. In the end, they waited for an entire day, yet, they did not see her leave. Even the letters they sent did not receive any reply. Hence, they pulled Elder Sesame along, and brought him up the mountain to search for her. Sesame was her contracted beast, so he would not be obstructed by the formations of Jade Forest Mountain. Naturally, he was able to enter. Chapter 107. Wu Song spoke with confidence, however, when he was talking about Yu Luo, his eyes flickered. It would be strange if Zhu Yao could not see the situation. It seemed that the two of them had taken a liking to each other after a few exchanges. They were just about to develop a relationship that was beyond friendship, but she didn't want to bump into them. Don't worry, I'm not such an open-minded person. Zhu Yao patted on his shoulders. Speaking of which, in that dream, Wu Song had fallen in love with Yu Luo at first sight as well, and then, he was completely devoted to her. Later on, because of her, he even walked on the path of evil. Although there was already another soul in Radish's body. But the body was still the same. Wait a minute. Could it be that what Wu Song liked was not Mu Meiyan as a person, but Yu Luo's face? Damn, this was indeed a society that only cared about appearances. However, this was also good. At the very least, with Little Radish, this righteous disciple, by his side, Wu Song would not need to rely on the heretic cultivator's side anymore. Sect Master, Lady Yu Luo and I did not. Wu Song explained weakly. Zhu Yao glanced at him. Even if I don't have it now, I can still have it in the future. Ah. Ha. Ah, what ah? Zhu Yao glared at him as she silently recalled a certain someone who had already ascended. She wanted to learn from a certain someone, wipe the floor clean, pat her buttocks, and leave. Not even a chance. Tomorrow, bring Yu Luo back to Azure Flight together. Ha! That was too fast. Zhu Yao raised her hand and patted on his head. I have to leave for a period of time. Yu Yao's injuries have yet to recover, so I can be at ease with Sesame looking after her. Also, I was the one who taught her all her spells, so when we get to Azure Flight, I can give you some pointers. Wu Song's expression sank, and only nodded after a while. Celestial Indus Sect's Chi Han Shure was a thorough person. Early in the morning of the second day, Zhu Yao sent Sesame and the others and Little Radish to Azure Flight. Of course, in front of ZMO, she simply told him that she was going down the mountain to train. He also found a few familiar people. The moment she returned to Jade Forest Mountain, she received Shi Han's message. Zhu Yao descended the mountain as promised, only to see that a divine vessel had already stopped above the plaza of the Great Hall. It looked as though it was made from white jade, and it looked exceptionally beautiful. The ship seemed to be surrounded by spiritual energy. It was surrounded by clouds and mist. One look and one could tell that it was not an ordinary item. Although the grade was much lower than the ones left behind by his master, it won in terms of appearance, making people feel that sitting on it was much more dignified. Zhu Yao silently cast a glance at ZMO, who was sending them off at the side, and looked at his mode of transportation. Compared to Yi Zichen and the like, it was simply too weak, all right. Evidently, ZMO did not notice these huge problems that concerned the people's livelihood. It was still standing in the square, trying its best to wave its claws goodbye to her. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes, and walked back to the cabin. Only after entering did he realize that there was actually a whole new world inside, as if a small world had been opened up. When the door opened, there was a garden inside. In the center of the garden was a pond, and there were red and white fish swimming in it. Chi Han led her to a small courtyard, and sat on a stone chair in the courtyard. At the back, there was actually a two-story building. Zhu Yao instantly felt that this ship was too mystical, and she really had the urge to take out the mystic treasures and mystic tools her master had left behind for her to test them out. Chi Han gave Rulu, who was behind him, a look, and the other party returned to the room at the back, and came out with a cup of tea. Zhu Yao had been paying a lot of attention to this Rulu, whose heart had changed in the first place. Mu Meiyan, though, was a natural-born actor. Even the expression in her eyes, when she looked at Zhu Yao, was filled with the excitement of a junior looking at a practitioner. Not a single flaw could be seen from her entire body. I will have to trouble Sovereign for this matter. Chi Han is extremely grateful. Chi Han, however, sincerely thanked her. Since Reverend cares so much about your sect's disciple, could she be your personal succeeding disciple? Zhu Yao intentionally asked. As expected, Mu Meiyan's expression sank a little as well. Evidently, she was very concerned about this question as well. That's not it. Chi Han replied. Oh, then she's a chamber disciple. That isn't it either. That's strange. Generally speaking, nascent soul elders of sects would accept disciples. Most of them were just disciples in name, and they were taught by the sect. Only chamber disciples and personal succeeding disciples would be personally taught mystic arts. Logically speaking, there was no need for him to do this for a regular nominal disciple. He came all the way here to look for her, and he still owed her a favor, right? To tell you the truth, although she's the daughter of an old friend of mine, before I discovered her, I did not know her at all. Chi-Han seemed to have recalled something from the past, as he took a deep breath, and then continued. Even the matter of taking her in as a disciple was decided by me alone. Oh. Zhu Yao was a little shocked. There was actually someone who was in such a rush to take in a disciple? However, that old friend of mine and I have been friends for many years. This is her only bloodline, and now that my friend has passed away, I naturally have to take care of her orphan. Chi-Han said with an exceptionally sorrowful tone, as though there was something so dense that it could not be dispelled in his eyes. Zhu Yao felt that he was hiding something, but in the end, this was someone else's matter, so it wasn't good for her to get to the bottom of it. Thus, she tactfully shut her mouth. When she turned her head, she suddenly bumped into Mu Meiyan, who had her head lowered with a gloomy expression, and instantly widened her eyes. The hell, so her eyes weren't playing tricks on her back then. There really was a shadow behind her, and looking at the figure, it even looked like a man. Currently, that shadow was currently lying on her shoulder, and its head was leaning against her ears, as though it was whispering softly. This strange scene, as though she had seen a ghost in broad daylight, caused Zhu Yao to tremble from fright, and she had almost smashed the teacup over. In the past, she had seen something like this on television. What vengeful spirit seeking death? Terrifying scenes like being possessed by ghosts and whatnot had all popped out. Fortunately, Chi-Han spoke up in time. Following her gaze, he looked towards Mu Meiyan, who was in a daze. Rulu. Mu Meiyan was startled, as though she had regained her senses from her own thoughts. What are you spacing out for? Hurry and pour some tea for the sovereign. Chi-Han thought that she was dissatisfied with the disciple's attitude, and hurriedly reminded her. Only then did Mu Meiyan walk towards her, and fill the teacup in her hands. The shadow on her shoulder moved for a moment, and slowly turned its head, as though it was looking at her. Zhu Yao's hand trembled, and she instantly broke out in cold sweat. However, that shadow's gaze did not stay on her for too long, as it turned its head back, and then, it slowly faded and disappeared. Zhu Yao only calmed down after gulping down a large mouthful of tea. Mommy mia, just what in the world was that? She once again glanced at Chi-Han, who did not feel anything. Could the others not see it? When they arrived at Celestial Indus Sect, it was already afternoon. Although the celestial vessel was beautiful, its speed was simply a pain in the ass. Initially, if the two of them were to fly on their swords, a journey like this would only require 4 hours. Yet, they had to fly for an entire day. The person who came out to welcome them was the sect master of Celestial Indus Sect, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. As expected, turning into an old man or whatever, was just Zemo's personal hobby. After flying for so long, Zhu Yao no longer had the mood to be courteous with so many people. Hanging up her cold and prideful mask, she casually nodded. Chi-Han was tactful as well, as he hurriedly arranged for a disciple to bring her to the guest room to rest. He planned on bringing her to see that so-called disciple tomorrow. Recalling the shadow that was following behind Mu Meiyan's back, Zhu Yao felt a chill seeping out from the depths of her heart. She was unable to figure out what that shadow was. There were practitioners in this world, and naturally, there were creatures like ghosts as well. However, she was certain that the shadow was definitely not a ghost. Ghosts were dark creatures, and practitioners carried spiritual energy in their bodies, so ghosts were unable to approach them. And the aura that was faintly emitted out from that shadow even made her feel a little apprehensive. Just what in the world was that? Why was it together with Mu Meiyan? And looking at its appearance, it seemed to be very familiar with her, and it did not look like it wanted to harm her. Zhu Yao felt that the shadow was definitely related to Mu Meiyan's resurrection, and the matter of its suddenly appearing in Little Radish's divine sense. And it was the key to her eliminating this bug. After pondering for a moment, Zhu Yao released her divine sense, and carefully hid her own aura. The entire celestial Indus sect was instantly within her vision. Currently, Mu Meiyan was using the body of the sect master's daughter, and the place she was staying at was on another mountain peak not too far away from her. She should be currently cultivating, as she sat cross-legged on the bed. Currently, she was at the second level of essence, and this was the time where she needed to raise her cultivation. Zhu Yao recalled that in her dream, after her resurrection, her cultivation rose very quickly. In a mere 200 years, she had already formed her nascent soul. If she was to say that she did not have any special methods, even a ghost would not believe her. As expected, the ice spiritual energy that was initially entering her body in a regular pattern, suddenly became hurried. As though they were being attracted by something, they endlessly poured into her body. As though she was unable to endure such a turbulent flow of spiritual energy, cold sweat seeped out from her forehead, and her aura became hurried as well. However, she still did not stop the absorption of spiritual energy. An hour later, her expression slowly relaxed, and the flow of spiritual energy entering her body had calmed down as well. After absorbing spiritual energy for a while, she finally stopped. Only then did she stop. Her cultivation was already at the third level of Qi disciple. Mu Meiyan opened her eyes, and took a deep breath. Only then did the corner of her lips rise into a smile. Her initially pitiful face, for a moment, looked a little seductive and sinister. "Thank you," she said out of nowhere. Behind her, however, a shadow faintly surfaced. That shadow seemed to have already become one with her, and its entire body was coiling around her body. Its upper body was lying on top of hers, and its head just happened to be right next to her ears, as though it was saying something. Unfortunately, Zhu Yao was completely unable to hear it. She guessed that the shadow was sending her a voice transmission. A moment later, Mu Meiyan revealed a happy smile. "I understand. This time, I will definitely change the ending." She paused for a moment again, as though she was waiting for the shadow's reply. A moment later, she said, "But tomorrow. I have to rush before then." She sank into silence for a moment, and then, her expression suddenly turned a little sinister. Her hands were tightly clenched into fists. "Amen. At most, in 100 years, I will definitely form my Azoth core. That thing, she can forget about ever obtaining it." "What thing? Speak clearly, hey." Just as she was about to listen carefully, suddenly, the shadow that was lying on Mu Meiyan's shoulder seemed to have sensed something, as it fiercely turned its head. She simply felt a chill straight into the depths of her heart. Before she could even retract her divine sense, a huge force suddenly assaulted her. She simply felt pain in her chest, as she puked out a mouthful of blood. Her divine sense was faintly aching. In an instant, she felt a lingering fear. If she had not retreated in time, not only would she have puked out a mouthful of blood, she would have died here. Chapter 108. What the hell was that? Ever since she entered the soul formation stage, it had been a long time since she had been injured, but now, just because that black shadow glanced at her, her divine sense was injured. Zhu Yao took a deep breath, and calmed herself down. Only after a while did she feel a little better. This time, he did not dare to look anymore. That black shadow was obviously a super cheat that was helping Mu Meiyan. It was too heaven-defying. Fortunately, he had intentionally concealed his aura, or else he would have been exposed. Zhu Yao adjusted her breathing for an entire night, before she finally recovered. Early in the morning of the second day, Qi Han came to look for her. When they came, Qi Han had made it very clear that he had asked her to save his own disciple. Zhu Yao was also faintly guessing if that person was Yu Hanxin, who was also the main target of attack in this world war after Mu Meiyan's resurrection. Qi Han exchanged a few courteous words with her, before bringing her to the mountain behind Celestial Indus sect. Compared to ancient hill sects for seasons of spring, the front of Wu sect's mountain was a little overly hot, and the back of the mountain was actually a glacier. Such an environment was simply something that Zhu Yao, a person who believed in science, could not understand. Qi Han brought her to the highest point of the glacier. There was a huge lake there. The strange thing was that the lake water wasn't frozen. Of course, it wasn't a hot spring. There was a huge block of ice floating on the surface of the lake, and there seemed to be something flowing inside. It looked colorful and very beautiful. Qi Han, however, stopped at the lakeside and did not leave. Just as Zhu Yao was puzzled, she saw him pointing at the piece of ice in the air. The one frozen inside is my disciple. Zhu Yao was a little startled. She probed with her divine sense, and realized that there really was the aura of a living person inside. However, it was extremely weak, and if she did not look closely, she would not be able to detect it. There was no form inside at all. Zhu Yao silently cast a doubtful glance at him. This can even be considered a human. Are you kidding me? Only then did Qi Han let out a long sigh, and answered unhurriedly. Actually, this disciple of mine has yet to be born. What? Speak human language. An old friend is in trouble. By the time I got there, both husband and wife had been murdered. Qi Han's expression sank. Before my old friend died, he took out the fetus that was still breathing from his wife's womb. Using an ancient secret art, he sealed the fetus in this ice, and instructed me to place it here. It has been more than 5 years since it took shape with the help of a formation. What the fuck, is this even possible? This was much better than modern technology. He didn't even need to borrow a stomach anymore. Zhu Yao expressed that the entire world was dumbfounded. She had only heard of plants growing without soil, but she had never thought that humans could do it too. Zhu Yao silently felt that her worldview was showing signs of collapsing. However, it should be the time when the melon is ripe. Qi Han frowned. He stared at the giant block of ice. But this child has yet to be born, and its aura is growing weaker and weaker. So far, I can't detect it at all, so I asked the Venerable One to help me take a look. Zhu Yao was speechless. In the end, he pulled her over to help with the delivery. She was a student of technology, not gynecology. Zhu Yao suppressed the urge to roar out in the depths of her heart, and once again took a look. That ice cube. Qi Han said that he was completely unable to detect any auras, however, she was certain that there were indeed living people inside, just that they were very faint. He flew into the air. After carefully inspecting the ice block, he discovered that the formation on it was indeed very exquisite. It was completely like an automatic supply device, continuously injecting nutrients into the ice. There was also a large amount of ice spiritual energy being transmitted into it. Just like what Qi Han said, this formation didn't have any issues at all. Although it was a little embarrassing. But theoretically speaking, there shouldn't be any issues. But why was the aura growing weaker instead? You added a defensive formation on top of this formation. Zhu Yao asked. Could it be that it was blocked and unable to come out? Qi Han nodded. However, this defensive formation can only defend against external attacks. If there's any commotion inside, naturally, it will be able to break out of the formation. Zhu Yao sank into silence. For a moment, she couldn't figure out the reason either. Even if she used her divine sense to inspect it, she could only capture a blurry image and strands of weak aura. Forget about a formed fetus, she couldn't even detect a body. Sighing, just when Zhu Yao was about to give up, she suddenly saw a red dot of light entering the ice block, and instantly, it disappeared without a trace. That was fire spiritual energy. Could it be, you said this child has already been nurtured for 5 years? Zhu Yao turned and asked. Qi Han nodded. Yes. Initially, it should have formed in 10 months. However, the child has yet to be born, and its aura has yet to disappear. Until now, it has already been 5 years. The hell? Zhu Yao cursed. She finally knew why. Follow me. Zhu Yao pulled Qi Han down, and then, according to a few different directions of the lake, she had him set down different formations. However, all of them were spiritual guiding formations, though, the amount of spiritual energy that every single formation was attracting towards one another was different. When the 5 different spiritual guiding formations of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were completed, Zhu Yao had Qi Han activate the formation together with her. The surrounding 5 types of spiritual energy were then attracted towards the center of the lake. Zhu Yao then added a formation to guide spiritual energy on top of the ice block. She wasn't sure what kind of spirit vein the child inside had, so she didn't dare to use a formation that was too strong. Hence, the guiding of the spiritual energy was very slow as well. The first thing that was guided over was fire spiritual energy. As expected, the red dot of fire entered the ice block the moment it came into contact with it. And the aura that could only be detected earlier suddenly grew a little stronger. Qi Han sensed it as well, and he suddenly widened his eyes. Sovereign, this. Just what's going on? He never expected that after thinking of so many methods, a few spiritual guiding formations were enough to confirm it. Zhu Yao sighed, and lightly replied. The child inside doesn't have the ice spirit vein. In fact, the reason why the fetus had never been born was very simple. This spirit fetus had always been nourished by spirit energy, so its birth naturally required the nourishment of spirit energy. However, everyone's spirit root was different. The glacier was filled with ice spirit qi. It was fine before the ice spirit qi was formed. If the person inside did not have an ice spirit root, he would not be able to absorb ice spirit qi. As for the rest of the spiritual qi, it was pitifully little. With the lack of spiritual qi, its aura naturally became weaker and weaker. She had just seen some ignition spiritual energy being absorbed, so the person inside had at least a fire spiritual root. However, she was afraid that the other party did not have a single fire spirit vein, so she set up 5 spirit guiding formations. Hearing her words, Qi Han understood as well, and a smile had already appeared on his face. At the same time he was activating the formation, he stared intensely at the ice block at the center, so that he could remove the formation the moment he noticed that the spiritual energy was out of place. After the fire spiritual energy, the metal spiritual energy also gathered. Just like the fire spiritual energy, the metal spiritual energy was absorbed into the ice the moment it came into contact with it. Metal and fire dual spiritual roots. A joyous expression appeared on Qi Han's face. This was an extremely good aptitude. However, in the next moment, the wood spiritual energy was absorbed into the ice as well. Could it be a triple metal, fire, and wood spirit veins? That was still acceptable. However, immediately after, the earth spiritual energy and water spiritual energy were absorbed into the ice without any resistance as well. Qi Han's expression turned a little ugly. He almost could not react in time. Could it be that this disciple of his, who had yet to be born, was actually a mixed 5-element spirit vein? This blow was simply too huge. He had worked so hard for more than 10 years, and now, he was back to square one. Zhu Yao silently lit a candle for her cheap master at the side as well. Who asked you to rush to take in a disciple? How tragic, right? However, when she recalled that she herself had a basket of pentaspirit veins radishes in Azure Flight sect as well, she instantly felt balanced. However, in her dreams, she clearly remembered that Yu Hanxin was the same as Mu Mei Yen, a mutated ice spirit vein. Could it be that the one inside wasn't that Mary Sue female lead, Yu Hanxin, or was it because Mu Mei Yen did not succeed in taking over Little Radish's body, hence, a butterfly effect occurred? However, when Yu Hanxin first appeared in her dreams, she was a 10-year-old little girl who was directly brought up the mountain by Qi Han, and there was no such thing as a frozen spirit embryo either. If not for Qi Han calling her disciple over and over again, she would not have believed that the spirit embryo in the ice was Yu Hanxin either. Zhu Yao could not understand, and could only sense the aura in the middle which was already growing stronger. After Qi Han found out that it could absorb 5 types of spiritual energy, he strengthened the spirit guiding formation. The spiritual energy in the surroundings was currently pouring in endlessly. And the aura inside was becoming more and more condensed as well. 6 hours later, finally, a cracking sound could be heard from the ice. Zhu Yao immediately stopped the spirit guiding formation below, and stared at the ice which was already beginning to crack apart together with Qi Han. That gigantic ice was currently cracking apart inch by inch, and not a moment later, its surface was filled with cracks. A piece of shattered ice the size of a palm fell from above, and in an instant, as though they had received some sort of signal, the other ice chunks began to fall one after another. And within the ice which they could only sense earlier, as though some sort of door had been opened, they could already completely see the human figures inside. But Mama's egg, why are there 2 of them? As all the ice chunks fell, the 2 little figures inside fell straight down as well. They were twins, 1 male and 1 female. However, their figures were not weak babies, but the size of 5-year-old children. Qi Han flew up, and instantly caught one of the girls. He looked a little blankly at the one in his embrace. The hell, where's the other one? Zhu Yao simply wanted to curse out. At a time like this, your sister's daydreaming. Left with no choice, Zhu Yao could only fly over as well. Just as the little boy was about to fall into the water, she scooped him up, and then flew back to the shore. She did not know if it was because he was sealed in the ice, but the child's entire body was drenched. His eyes were closed, yet, his figure was extremely skinny and small. He could basically be considered as a bag of bones. If she did not know that he had stayed in the ice for 5 years, just based on his small frame, she would definitely think that he was not even 3 years old. Zhu Yao cast a dirt removal art on him. After pondering for a moment, she took out a set of clothes from her storage ring, and wrapped it around him. Qi Han coincidentally saw this when he returned, and as though he had just recalled that he had to bring clothes for his disciple, he took out a set of pink clothes as well. Looking at its size, it seemed to have been prepared a long time ago. Sovereign. Qi Han glanced at the child in her embrace, a hint of guilt surfaced on his face, as though he was a little regretful that he did not catch him earlier. Back then, when my old friend sealed the child in ice, the child was already 7 months old. I had checked as well, and there was only 1 baby girl. However, I never expected that there would actually be 2. Chapter 109. Zhu Yao glanced at him. Towards this explanation of his, she could not help but feel a little doubtful. Earlier, she saw it very clearly. When he picked up the girl, a hint of light flashed across his face, as though he had received a huge surprise, and he completely did not have the mind to care about the other child. Zhu Yao felt that he was definitely hiding some things, however, these were unrelated to her. You. Suddenly, the girl in his embrace moved. She slowly opened her eyes, looked a little curiously at Chi-Han who was hugging her, and let out, "Aw" sounds. "You don't know how to speak?" Chi-Han asked. Toward such a pointless question, Zhu Yao instantly rolled her eyes. "Nonsense, you know how to speak the moment you're born." Chi-Han however seemed to be in a very good mood, as he stroked the girl's head. "It's fine. In the future, I'll be your master. Your name is Yu Hanqing." As expected, it's her. Perhaps Yu Hanqing really had the female lead's halo, as she suddenly revealed a very obedient smile towards Chi-Han, and responded with a few, "ah" sounds. Chi-Han seemed to have been moved by her, as he smiled as well, his entire face was filled with smiles. Coo. Zhu Yao had no choice but to interrupt this scene of deep feelings between master and disciple. Chi-Han was startled, as though he had just recalled that there was another twin brother beside him. He looked a little apologetically at Zhu Yao. "He's called Yuing then." Even Zhu Yao could sense such a difference in treatment, and she felt even more strange. However, it didn't seem to be related to her. With a turn of her hand, she stuffed the child in her embrace into Chi-Han's embrace. "This is your cargo, please accept it." Chi-Han seemed to have never expected that she would suddenly turn hostile, as he barely managed to catch it. Unsteadily, he even took a few steps back. Suddenly, he recalled something. He hurriedly called out to Zhu Yao. "Sovereign, please take a look at these two children and see if they're injured." Zhu Yao turned to take a glance. Honestly speaking, if not because of that bug, Mu Meiyan, she really did not want to get involved in this. She really didn't want to get involved in this mess. This person, Chi-Han, at first glance, looked rather good, however, he really didn't know how to teach disciples. Looking at his attitude towards the two children, it was clear that he was biased towards Yu Hanqing from the very first glance. Although she could not exclude the possibility that there might be other reasons, his performance was a little too obvious. It was no wonder that Mu Meiyan, as a female antagonist, had such a twisted and extreme personality after her reincarnation. As a master, it was fine if he did not treat everyone equally, but he was still so obviously biased. But he didn't notice anything. "I'll have to trouble the Venerable One." Probably because he saw that Zhu Yao's expression wasn't very good, Chi-Han became a little anxious. When he sealed his spirit embryo, he knew that this art might possibly affect a child's divine sense. That was why he had invited her. Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment, and then walked back. She reached out to the child's wrist, however, she was grabbing onto the little boy's. She sent a wisp of spiritual energy into it. Other than noticing that the other party was abnormally weak, his meridians were all normal. He focused and probed into his divine sense again. Although the child was a spirit embryo, he had yet to officially start cultivating. In addition, he was unconscious, so she entered without any hindrance. The child's divine sense was very small. Although it was not damaged, it was very weak and unstable. It was as if the slightest bit of force would cause it to collapse. Zhu Yao carefully backed out, and just as she was about to explain to Chi-Han. Chi-Han, however, spoke up first. "Let's take a look at cold stars." As he spoke, he gestured for the little girl to stretch out her hand. He even rolled up her sleeves himself. "Zhu Yao, can you be any more obvious in your favoritism?" "No need." Zhu Yao coldly glanced at him, and for a moment, she began to worry a little about the boy's fate. She could faintly see a new bug slowly rising. However, most probably, the other party would not be as lucky as Mu Meiyan, who had the chance to be reborn. His divine sense isn't damaged, it's just a little unstable. He just needs to recuperate a little more. That girl shared the same body as him, so it should be the same as well. When Chi Han heard her say that, he knew that she no longer had the intention to look at him. A little disappointed, he retracted his hand. However, he secretly decided to take a look at his disciple himself when he returned. Although the matter has been resolved, I'll be heading back first. Zhu Yao no longer wanted to speak with this failure in education. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, she suddenly felt the corner of her sleeves tighten. She turned around to look, and just happened to meet a pair of eyes that were as dark as the night. The little boy had woken up unknowingly. His eyes were widened, and he stared straight at her. One of his hands was even grabbing onto the corner of her sleeves. "Ying, don't be impudent." When Chi Han saw this scene, he reprimanded him out of reflex. Compared to Yu Hanqing, his attitude was completely different. "Hurry and let go of the sovereign." However, the little boy still acted as though he did not hear anything, as he stared at her blankly. The hand that was grabbing onto the corner of her sleeves had instead tightened a little. Zhu Yao was a little puzzled. Why was he tugging onto her? Could it be a nestling plot? However, when he woke up earlier, the one who was hugging onto him was clearly Chi Han. "Let go." Zhu Yao hung up her cold and prideful mask, and lightly said. However, the little boy still did not have any reaction. He did not move, nor did he let go. Ying. Chi Han was a little anxious, as though he was very angry at the impolite actions of this additional disciple. He forcefully reached out his hand and pulled the little boy's hand away. Zhu Yao's expression changed, and she could not help but interrupt. "I say, Chi Han, seeing that I have helped you, it's best if you let someone else take this boy in as a disciple. Following you will really ruin his life, you know." Chi Han was startled, as though he did not understand why she said that. However, Zhu Yao could no longer be bothered to explain. Turning around, she continued to walk forward. However, before she could even take 10 steps, she was once again pulled by someone. Seeing that she had left, that little boy seemed to have mustered up some unknown strength from somewhere, as he fiercely sprang out from Chi Han's embrace. Although he did not know how to walk, he still crawled over with a leap, and once again grabbed onto the corner of her sleeves. "Zhu Yao, little radish, what are you planning to do?" Chi Han's furious voice was calling out to him from behind. Unfortunately, Ying did not have any reaction at all. That was to be expected, he had just been born, only a ghost would know that was his name. Little Radish simply grabbed onto the corner of her sleeves, and struggled to raise his head to look at her. His expression was still dazed, and within his black eyes, there was only her figure that was clean and clear. Zhu Yao sighed, and seriously suspected that someone had placed a buff on her to attract little radishes. Why did little radishes like to throw themselves onto her? Resigned to her fate, she bent her waist and carried Ying up. Forget it, in any case, she was going to the front mountain as well, so she might as well bring him there along the way. She once again looked at this peculiar child, stared straight into his eyes, pointed at his little chest, and said word by word. "Your name is Ying." The little boy did not have any reaction, and continued to stare at her unblinkingly, as though he could not hear anything at all. At that moment, Zhu Yao was a little worried. This child couldn't possibly have a problem with his intelligence, right? After being sealed in ice for so many years, he must have lacked some sort of nutrition, causing his brain to not develop properly or something. Right now, she really wanted to give him a CT scan. After that basket of little radishes in Azure Flight, Zhu Yao realized that she was once again being pestered by a new wave of little radishes. That day, when she carried little Radish Ying back to the front mountain of Celestial Indus sect, that little radish who had been hugging onto her neck the entire time, actually refused to let go, as though he had made up his mind to cling onto her. No matter how she tried to tempt him, he refused to come down. Zhu Yao's neck had even turned red from being strangled by him. Yet, she was unable to circulate her spiritual energy, or use her mystic energy to forcefully pull him down. After all, he was still a child who did not even know how to speak, and she herself was a demigod stage practitioner. If she were to make a move on a child, she would not be able to bear the embarrassment. However, hugging onto a child the entire time was still very embarrassing, alright? The celestial Indus sect master's forehead was filled with cold sweat from her glare, and even Chi-Han had an awkward and apologetic look. Only Mu Mei-yen, who had already turned into Rulu, stared at the girl in Chi-Han's hands with a dark expression, as she completely focused her attention on this farce. She had scolded, she had spoken, and she had even reasoned with him, yet Little Radish still hung onto her neck like an unmoving mountain. In the end, the crowd had no other choice, and could only suggest for Zhu Yao to stay for another night. Most probably, when the child was tired, he would naturally let go. Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment. Glancing at Mu Mei-yen, whose face was filled with bugs, she had no choice but to agree to it. Yuing still did not know how to speak, and he could not even walk stably. After Zhu Yao returned to the guest room, she tried to coax him to come down. Yet, his head simply tilted, and without saying a word, he buried himself into her neck, ignoring her. Zhu Yao powerlessly glanced at him, as she crazily retorted in her heart. Logically speaking, in the modern era, she was basically not a very popular person among children. What was with this situation where he was pouncing onto her one after another? Was she transported into Plants vs. Zombies, and it was even in endless mode? It was already evening now, and children usually slept early. However, this one on her body was a little different, as he was extremely energetic. She had even specially accompanied him to lie on the bed for 4 hours, yet, he did not have the slightest intention of falling asleep. Only when it was deep into the night did she feel the little body in her embrace let out a relatively stable sound. She had only moved slightly, yet, the hand on her neck had actually tightened. Zhu Yao sighed, and had no choice but to cast a deep slumber incantation on him, before forcefully pulling him down from her body. In any case, there were no outsiders here, and no one had seen her make a move. Zhu Yao placed Little Radish on the bed, only to realize that there was no blanket on the bed. Most probably, because she was a demigod stage practitioner, there were no blankets prepared in this house. Zhu Yao had no choice but to take out a mermaid's veil from her storage ring and cover him, before standing up. In the depths of her heart, she still pitied this child a little. Back then, when Chi-Han returned to the front mountain, he had tested the spirit veins of the 2 children. The Yuhanqing was the same as in her dreams. As expected, he possessed the ice spirit veins, while Yuing possessed the penta spirit veins. This was basically the difference between heaven and earth. Most probably, even if Chi-Han had the intention to take him in as his disciple, it would be impossible for him to stay by his side. Most people with the penta spirit veins were outer sect disciples. Chapter 110. After glancing at the child once again, Zhu Yao left the room. Actually, the main reason why she came here was because of Yuhanqing. Logically speaking, the appearance of the bug was due to the fight between her and Mu Mei-yen. Both of them were responsible for it. Hence, she initially thought that Yuhanqing was also a bug. Fortunately, Yuhanqing's face was very clean, and there were no letters on it. In other words, she only needed to focus on guarding against Mu Mei-yen. She originally wanted to shamelessly stay here for a few more days. It would be best if she could solve the problem from the root, but after seeing the black shadow behind her, she changed her mind. She felt like she couldn't withstand the blow from that night. But what exactly was that black shadow behind her? If only her master was here. She could ask him about it. Currently, she could only go back and ask ZMO indirectly. Zhu Yao summoned her flying sword. After pondering for a moment, she picked up a piece of incantation paper and transformed it into a sound transmission paper crane. After instructing Chi-Han and the others to take good care of the child, she would return first. Only then did she fly away on her flying sword. Celestial Indus sect was located at the edge of a forest, and this forest was even the territory of demonic beasts. The deeper one went, the more demonic beasts there would be. And the innermost part of the forest was the demon realm. It was said that only demonic beasts lived in this place. No one had been there before because there was a boundary river in the middle. The boundary river was a forbidden area for magic. All the cultivators who went there could not use any magic power at all. It was the same for the demonic beasts. However, the demonic beasts were taller and stronger than humans. They could kill a few people just by sitting on them, so almost no practitioner would go there to court death. Initially, Zhu Yao wanted to return to Ancient Hill sect, and on her way, she would definitely have to pass by a small forest. She changed her mind at the last minute. Because she remembered a plot, and it was related to the magic forbidden zone. Hence, he turned around and flew towards the depths of the forest. After Mu Meiyan had been reborn, the reason why she was able to fight against Yu Hanxin, other than Wu Song, who had cultivated the devil path. There was another great helper, and that was the immortal who had met with misfortune. Although he was unable to withstand the heavenly Tao in the later stages and perished, the immortal emperor was still able to help him. However, the immortal weapons and immortal pills that he left behind were of great help to her. Those were all things that belonged to the upper realm, and their lethality was astonishing. And back then, the thing that destroyed Ancient Hill sect was a mystic artifact called Flames of Karma. It could emit out black flames, and it could not be extinguished by mystic arts. However, Ancient Hill sect was burned by this fire for an entire day, and not a single disciple survived. Even the sea level had dropped a lot. As for Mu Meiyan, who had possessed Little Radish's body. However, she felt that this was what she should do. She called it revenge for the original owner of her body. He had already annihilated his entire family. This was not revenge, but repaying kindness with enmity. She was also the other reason why Zhu Yao did not want her to take over Little Radish's body no matter what. This forest was very vast. Even though she flew at full speed, she still spent 2 hours before reaching the border. From afar, she could see a huge silver river appearing in front of her eyes. Before Zhu Yao could even sigh at its magnificence. His aura was like a flood. She instantly fell from the sky. Damn, she had forgotten that this was a forbidden area for magic. There was a dull pain in the bottom of his heart, and his body suddenly became very heavy. It had been many years since she had such a feeling. Zhu Yao had no choice but to accept her fate and take a few steps back. The moment she moved, the pressure on her body instantly relaxed, and her strength returned to her body. What a mystical place. Zhu Yao glanced at the beach in front of her. There were many dried branches and withered leaves piled up on the riverbank. She could faintly see the bones of demonic beasts of unknown species. She recalled that Mu Meiyan came to this beach after she became an Azoth core. Then, a jade pendant fell from the sky, and that jade pendant contained the remnant soul of that fallen deity. Initially, she had wanted to place a few rebirth incantations here. The moment the jade pendant fell, the formation would instantly send that deity into reincarnation. Naturally, he would not have the chance to gift the divine pellet or artifact to others. However, the river here was so vast. Only a ghost would know where the jade pendant would fall to. Zhu Yao felt a deep sense of sorrow. Just when he was at a loss as to what to do, a demonic beast suddenly appeared behind him with a roar. A pair of blood-red eyes stared fixedly at her, and it was even drooling, as though it had seen something delicious. It was actually a 9th-rank demonic beast. Its strength was on par with her, an early-stage demigod. Of course, that was the theory. In reality, the moment Zhu Yao released her aura, that demonic beast meowed, as though it was frightened. It laid on the ground and trembled. And it just so happened to choke on its own saliva, as though it wanted to cough, but did not dare to. Its long tail desperately slapped its own chest. Were all demonic beasts this stupid? Zhu Yao silently recalled a certain idiot. All right, they were all this stupid. Currently, she did not have the mood to care about this stupid demonic beast. She simply stared at the white riverbank in front of her, and thought about how she could permanently break the cheat of the female antagonist. For a moment, she had even forgotten to retract the dragon's might in her body. When she regained her senses, a black mass of demonic beasts sat there. Zhu Yao fiercely turned her head, and was given a fright. She even thought that the way she turned her head was wrong. Just where did this group of demonic beasts pop out from? An elegant white-clothed man walked out from among the demonic beasts, and gave her a deep bow with a respectful attitude. Lord, I wonder what instructions do you have for us to come here? Who called you? Even Zhu Yao herself was given a fright. All right. That man's face suddenly reddened, and as though he was a little embarrassed, he looked at her, and then said, We sense Lord's aura, that's why. I wonder what instructions Lord has for us. This subordinate will definitely not refuse. The man's eyes shone, revealing an expression that was similar to Sesame's in the past, and his face was filled with excitement, as though he had taken drugs. Even the group of demonic beasts behind him were the same. Although they were all lying on the ground with a respectful and obedient look, their eyes were all staring straight at her, sparkling, you know? Lord, hurry and look at me, hurry and look at me. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched, and her face darkened. In an instant, her heart was filled with ridicule, and she did not know where to start. Lord. Seeing that she was not speaking, that man suddenly knelt down, and his entire body was about to touch the ground. With an excited look, he said, This lowly one is called Chen Ning. Since young, I have no one to rely on. Lord, please take this lowly one in and serve by your side. The moment his words fell, the eyes of the surrounding beasts were all staring at him. Every single one of them looked as though they wanted to strangle him to death. Shameless bastard. He actually said such rude words. However, why didn't they think of it? They gritted their teeth. Chen Ning turned his head to glance at the group of beasts behind him as well, and gave a provocative smile. This daddy here said it. If you have the guts, come bite me. Lord, look at me again. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched, as she looked at the person who was still sticking to the ground. Who are you trying to fool? Which demonic beast has someone to rely on, hey? Sighing, she could now guess that this person who called himself Chen Ning was at the very least a 10th-ranked demonic beast that had taken on a human form. Zhu Yao retracted the aura from her body, and waved her hand towards the black mass of beasts. All of you can return to your positions. I don't need you guys. The moment her words fell, Zhu Yao instantly felt the low pressure of the entire place, as well as the resentment and anger. A moment later, the demonic beasts unwillingly began to crawl up, and slowly moved their feet, as though they were waiting for her to change her mind. Probably because it was close to the demon realm, the demonic beasts in this forest were mostly strong. Just in this group alone, there were 7 to 8 10th-ranked demonic beasts, while the rest were at least 8th-ranked demonic beasts. Other than Chen Ning, who had already taken on a human form, the rest of them were beasts that were as tall as buildings, and when they moved, they were like mountains. Zhu Yao did not know how they were able to quietly crouch behind her. Zhu Yao sighed. Glancing at the beach in front of her, she suddenly had an idea. Since the jade pendant was dropped on this beach, then what if there wasn't a beach? Wait a minute. The moment Zhu Yao called out, the group of demonic beasts that were currently dispersing instantly crawled back, and their eyes instantly shone even brighter than before. "Lord, what are your orders?" Chen Ning had even rubbed against her body, looking as though he could not wait to hug her thighs. After being coldly glanced at by her, he obediently took a few steps back, and once again kneeled on the ground. There's no need to be so formal, right? I do indeed have something to trouble you guys with." When her words fell, a series of responses sounded from below. "Lord, please speak. Lord, feel free to instruct us. Even if it means death." Zhu Yao's expression darkened as she looked at this group of overly passionate demonic beasts. Although she clearly knew that they only recognized her as their master because of the suppression of her dragon bloodline, she was still unable to let down her guard in the depths of her heart. After all, she had the experience of almost being bitten to death by demonic beasts before. "It's nothing much. I just saw that the surface of this river is too narrow." Zhu Yao activated her lying mode. "Coo. Such a beautiful river, yet there's such an ugly riverbank. I feel that it's really affecting the aesthetics, so I wanted to dig the riverbank a little deeper, and widen the river's surface a little." The moment she said it, Zhu Yao felt that this reason was purely bullshit. Furthermore, that place was a magical forbidden zone, and even she herself did not wish to enter it. Forget about this group of demonic beasts. It would be strange if anyone responded to her request, right? So that's the case. Lord's words are too logical. I have long found this riverbank to be an eyesore. That's right, it's so ugly. It's simply not fit to be called a riverbank. It's so ugly that it affects my mood. Dig it out. That's right, dig it out. Zhu Yao, what the hell, you guys believed me just like that. What happened to your promised moral integrity? Where's your worldview? Don't think that just because you guys aren't human, you can abandon it so easily, hey. Zhu Yao seemed to be unable to support her dropped chin. The group of demonic beasts, however, walked towards the riverbank on their own, and began to dig the sand. Furthermore, every single one of them looked as though they had some sort of deep grudge against the riverbank, as they dug with all their might. Even that one called Chen Ning ran over with a leap. When he landed on the ground, he turned into a gigantic four-clawed demonic beast. Stretching out his two front claws, he began to dig the sand with all his might. As he killed, a cloud of dust rose into the air. The beach that was completely silent earlier was now filled with the figures of beasts. Don't dig too deep. It's fine if it's about the same as the bottom of the river. Zhu Yao could not help but give a reminder. What followed was a series of howls. Chapter 111. With the addition of so many high-ranked demonic beasts, after struggling for exactly 6 hours, when the sky was already bright, the entire river bank in the forest disappeared. Zhu Yao instantly heaved a sigh of relief. The river water had a very strong corrosive effect towards mystic artifacts, and basically, they would lose their effects the moment they came into contact with the water. This was also the reason why this place was a magic forbidden zone. Now that there was no river bank, if that jade fell, it would instantly be destroyed, and it was impossible for Mu Meiyan to possess those mystic artifacts. After completing the mission, Zhu Yao had everyone return to their own homes and find their own mothers. Although the demonic beasts looked unwilling, they still did not dare to disobey her orders. With every step they took, they would turn their heads and disperse, except for that 10th-ranked demonic beast called Chen Ning. From the expansion of the river earlier, it could be seen that Chen Ning should be the strongest amongst this group of demonic beasts. Although the demonic beasts might not submit to his teachings, they did not dare to provoke him easily. He said that he did not live in this forest, but after knowing the direction she was heading in, he insisted that he was heading in the same direction, and shamelessly followed her. Yet, he just had to help her out earlier. Zhu Yao could not find the words to reject him, and could only allow him to follow. Lord, actually, I have a little bit of your bloodline as well. Look at my claws, don't they look very similar to yours? As Chen Ning said that, he reached out a gigantic chicken claw towards her. The hell, how are they similar? You're a motherfucking chicken claw, I'm a 5-clawed dragon, alright. Zhu Yao's expression turned as dark as ink. Turning her head, she glared at him, and coldly mocked. If you turn into a human, don't you look even more similar? When Chen Ning heard this, as though he had just regained his senses, he immediately returned to the image of that elegant white-clothed gentleman. He smiled brilliantly at her, and even intentionally reached out his front claws. No, now, it was his right hand. He looked to the right, and then to the left. He even secretly glanced at her hand, and chuckled while cupping his face. Lord has claws as well, and I have claws as well. We sure are fated. Fated your sister. Zhu Yao resisted the urge to slap him to death with her claws. Summoning her own flying sword, she then flew up. Chen Ning, like a qualified follower, immediately flew up as well. He was a demonic beast. There was no need for Zhu Yao to borrow a mystic artifact to fly in the first place, but she had already gotten used to it after so many years. Chen Ning silently looked at her. He chanted something, and materialized a flying sword as well. Step on it. Seeing that Zhu Yao was ignoring him, he glanced at her again. The 3-feet-long green peak beneath his feet flashed, and suddenly changed its shape. Its appearance was exactly the same as the one beneath Zhu Yao's feet. Furthermore, he straightened his back and adopted the exact same posture as her. That's enough. Zhu Yao almost spat out a mouthful of blood on his face. Was there a need to learn from her to this extent? Why don't you change your appearance to be exactly like her, eh? Zhu Yao felt a little irritated. I need some time alone. Ignoring the actions of Chen Ning, who was a madman chasing after idols, he focused on controlling his sword, raising its speed to the maximum. Chen Ning also tactfully shut his mouth. They didn't speak on the way, and after an hour, when she was just about to fly out of this forest, Chen Ning suddenly spoke. There's actually a mortal down there. Zhu Yao was startled, as she had indeed sensed someone's presence below. However, it was still a distance away, and there seemed to be some rank 3 demonic beasts around. It was accompanied by a faint smell of blood. That person did not have the aura of spiritual qi, so he should be immortal. But this was the demonic beast forest. Why would there be a mortal who would take things this hard? Zhu Yao pondered for a moment, and in the end, she couldn't just leave him to die. Turning around, she flew in that direction. From afar, she saw 3 rank 3 little demonic beasts surrounding something. Initially, she wanted to summon a lightning bolt to scare the demonic beasts away. However, when she saw the little figure that was lying in a pool of blood, her heart instantly trembled. The hell, why was it him? Zhu Yao was instantly enraged. The pressure of a demigod immediately pressed towards the 3 demonic beasts, instantly pressing them onto the ground. Yu Ying. Wasn't he still sleeping in Celestial Indus sect? Why was he in this forest, hey? As though he had heard her voice, the unmoving bloody person who was lying on the ground earlier, suddenly moved, and raised his head. The moment he saw her flying down, his eyes which were initially dead still instantly shone. He actually began to crawl towards her. Zhu Yao landed next to him, and just when she was about to carry him up to inspect him, he took a step ahead of her. He grabbed onto the corner of her robe, and held onto it tightly, as though he was unable to let go no matter what. Zhu Yao instantly felt a little sour in her heart. She hurriedly formed a hand seal to stop the blood on his body, and carried him into her embrace. His injuries were very severe, and it seemed as though his entire body was filled with wounds. Several of the bones in his legs were even broken. She really did not know how such a small child was able to hold on. Zhu Yao was a little anxious. His aura was very weak, and although she had temporarily stopped his bleeding, she did not know how long he could last. If she wanted to treat his injuries, her blood vessels had to be unblocked. He himself did not have any cultivation, and was unable to protect his heart vessels. She was afraid that he would not be able to hold on until she finished treating him. Yet, she had everything on her body, except for medicine. "Lord, do you need medicinal pellets?" Chen Ning suddenly popped his head out, and looked at her with an expectant look. "You have them." Zhu Yao turned her head in astonishment. Chen Ning nodded strongly, and reported out a string of names. "I have low-grade blood-staunching pellets, mid-grade blood-staunching pellets, and high-grade blood-staunching pellets. I also have low-grade, mid-grade, and low-grade essence pellets, body-strengthening pellets, foundation pellets, Azoth pellets, and nascent pellets. There's a wide variety of them, and they have everything you need. The price is affordable, and I'm honest with you. Furthermore, as long as it's a low-grade pellet, I'll introduce a buy two get one free discount, and the price is only..." Lord, do you want them?" Chen Ning changed his words at the last moment. "I don't have any spirit stones." Zhu Yao's expression darkened. She had everything, but she didn't have any money. Chen Ning's face instantly flushed red. He glanced at her with an awkward look, and weakly replied, "It's just a few medicinal pellets. If Lord wants them, how can this subordinate accept your spirit stones? Didn't he say he was used to it earlier? Then give me a high-grade blood-staunching pellet," Zhu Yao said. Chen Ning instantly retrieved a small bottle from the pouch next to him, and passed it to her with extreme joy. Zhu Yao poured out a pellet that was suffused with a faint red glow. As expected, it was a high-grade blood-staunching pellet. She then returned the rest to Chen Ning, and said, "I'll return the Spirit Empress to you in the future." Chen Ning's expression instantly collapsed. Speaking too fast would kill a beast. He clearly just wanted to curry Lord's favor. Zhu Yao fed Yuing the blood-staunching pellet, and then used her spiritual energy to help him dissolve the medicinal effects, protecting his heart meridians. Only then did she undo the mystic art that she used to stop his bleeding earlier. Initially, she wanted to help him sit properly, and help him treat his injuries. However, Yuing was nestled in her embrace, and no matter what, he refused to get up. He did not move, nor did he speak. He simply stared straight at her, and did not even blink, as though he was afraid that she would once again leave. Zhu Yao's heart ached for a moment. She repeatedly guaranteed that she would not leave, and then, she simply allowed him to grab onto the corner of her robe, before allowing him to sit up. Zhu Yao closed her eyes, circulated the spiritual energy in her body, and summoned her own sword intent. In an instant, a phoenix flew out from her body, and its entire body was filled with lightning sparks, as though it was formed from lightning sparks. Not even a moment later, the lightning sparks slowly turned blue, turning into the color of water. Furthermore, they had turned gentle as well, and completely did not have the slightest bit of that ferocious feeling from before. It did not fly into the sky, instead, it spread open its gigantic wings, and brought the child in front of it under its wings. While the wounds on Yu Ying's body were slowly healing. In the beginning, Chen Ning was frightened by that huge bird, and his entire body could not help but tremble a little. Phoenix. That was an ancient divine beast just like a dragon. As a demonic beast, he naturally held fear and worship towards it. However, shouldn't Lord be a dragon? Why did the sword intent she cultivated look like a phoenix? Chen Ning could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. In the end, he concluded that as expected of Lord. So amazing. I worship her so much. I really want to hug her thighs. Zhu Yao spent an entire day and night before she was able to repair the meridians and wounds on the little ghost's body. After he was done, the first thing he did was to crawl forward 2 steps. Then, he hugged onto her neck and leaned into her embrace, not moving an inch. Zhu Yao was a little speechless. His clothes were already tattered beyond recognition, and after the clothes that were stained with fresh blood dried, they looked very dirty. Zhu Yao sighed and cast a dirt removal incantation on him. Only then did he feel a little better. After pondering for a moment, she then took out a few smaller clothes from her ring. Back then, when she was still in version 2.0, her master had made them for her. After she grew up, she did not know why her master would still place them in her storage ring. She had never been willing to throw them away either. Though they were female clothes, at the very least, they were better than him wearing a set of tattered clothes. Zhu Yao once again spent some effort before she was able to teach Yuing to wear the new clothes. This time, he was very obedient. He no longer hugged onto her and refused to let go. However, during the entire process of wearing the clothes, he was still tightly grabbing onto the corner of her clothes. Zhu Yao looked at the set of tattered clothes in her hands, which was the uniform of Celestial Indus sect disciples that had been changed out, and frowned. She could guess that when the little ghost woke up, he did not see her, hence, he chased after her, and arrived at this forest. She used a deep slumber incantation, and this place was right at the foot of Celestial Indus sect's mountain. It could be seen that the earliest he left the mountain was the morning of the 2nd day. Logically speaking, with so many disciples in Celestial Indus sect, if a child without any abilities ran out, there should be people who saw it. Even if no one saw it, after discovering it, they would definitely come looking for her. However, she had been sitting here for an entire day and night. Putting aside the disciples who came looking for a beating, Celestial Indus sect did not even have the slightest bit of reaction. This could only mean that they basically did not come looking for her, or they simply did not care about losing a disciple like this. He suddenly recalled the expression the Celestial Indus sect master had when he saw that Yuing possessed the pentaspirit veins during the spirit veins test. Especially when he saw that Yu Hanxin possessed the heavenly spirit veins, his expression was especially obvious. Most probably, he did not have any expectations for this child in the beginning, right? However, even if that was the case, a child had gone missing just like that. Putting aside the fact that he had just been born, and was as blank as a piece of white paper, even a slightly more normal person would come looking for him, right? Celestial Indus sect's disregarding attitude was something that Zhu Yao, who had transmigrated from the modern era, was completely unable to accept. After considering for a moment, she decided to bring the child back to Azure Flight sect. At the very least, there was a bunch of radishes that were similar to him, and they could coexist peacefully. Zhu Yao summoned her flying sword, and the child was still like a little tail, tightly tugging onto the corner of her clothes as he followed behind. She did not know if it was because he had self-taught himself when he descended the mountain yesterday, but he already knew how to walk. Although his posture was a little strange, and was a little stiff, he still stood very stably. Chapter 112. In consideration of the little radish on the sword, the speed of Zhu Yao's flying sword this time had evidently slowed down. It was even slower than the celestial boat she was sitting on earlier, and her speed could be said to be crawling like a tortoise. And she had even changed her direction at the last moment, as she planned to make a trip to Azure Flight first, and send the little radish into school. Chen Ning, this shameless beast, once again, wanted to use the excuse that it was along the way to pester her. However, not long after she left the forest, she bumped into a person. That was an as-off-stage practitioner. P.S. Human practitioner. Chen Ning seemed to recognize him. Looking at him from afar, his brows began to frown, and his face was filled with irritation. Master. That person cupped his fists and bowed towards Chen Ning. He did not even look at Zhu Yao at the side, and his face even carried a faint arrogant expression. The preparations for this year's treasure inspection conference have been completed. Is Master going to head to Treasure Seeking Island immediately? Not going. Chen Ning coldly replied with these two words. That person seemed to have never expected that he would reply in such a manner, and was instantly dumbfounded. A moment later, he regained his senses, and advised. Master, you were the one who personally presided over the treasure inspection conferences in the past years. There are many people, and if you don't go, I'm afraid this treasure inspection conference will go into chaos, and it will not be able to continue. Then I won't do it. That as-off-stage practitioner stiffened, as though he could not believe his own ears. He looked at Chen Ning with a shocked expression, as though every inch of his body was screaming. Master, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you, Master? That's your favorite activity in the past, you know. Enough, if there's nothing else, hurry and leave. Chen Ning waved his hands at him, as though he was chasing away a fly. That person had a dumbfounded look, as he simply could not understand why his master would change like this after a trip to a faraway place. He couldn't have been taken over, right? What's a treasure inspection conference? Zhu Yao could not help but ask. Chen Ning chuckled at her, and said without a care. Nothing much, it's just a place that sells some small items. A trade association. Zhu Yao said. She had been in this world for so long, yet, she had yet to properly stroll around the streets. This isn't an ordinary merchant guild. The Golden Core human cultivator saw the confusion on her face. He could not help but raise his head and say proudly, this is a chamber of commerce that is held by my Chiwu Pavilion once every 100 years. The items auctioned there are all rare treasures. Even ancient cultivation techniques are not something that can be easily found. There are also rare immortal herbs and all kinds of high-grade magic tools. As long as you have spirit stones, you can bid for them. Oh. So it was an auction, and it sounded rather high-end. Zhu Yao turned to look at Chen Ning. Even if you have something to do, you should go ahead. There's no need to send me off. Hearing that, Chen Ning's face completely collapsed. Just a moment ago, she looked as if there was no room for discussion. She turned her head and glared at the culprit, layers of murderous aura surging out. The Golden Core human cultivator broke out in cold sweat. He was just speaking the truth. Which part of his sentence had stepped on a landmine? Only then did he turn his head to look at the two people beside his master. That child, with one look, was obviously a mortal. As for the woman next to him, he couldn't see through her cultivation. It seemed that she must be above the nascent soul realm. Seeing how Master valued her so much, could it be that she was a soul formation cultivator? He suddenly understood. It seemed like his master wanted the other party to stay. He quickly began to mend the pen after the sheep were lost. Fellow Daoist, the Treasure Inspection Conference is bustling with activity. Fellow Daoist, why don't we go take a look together? I still have something to do. Although she was a little curious, it was inconvenient to bring a little radish along. Chiwu Pavilion's main branch is right in front, it won't take up too much time. He continued to persuade. Furthermore, there are many precious items inside. Not only are there rare treasures, there are even ancient mystic art manuals. There's everything you need. Ancient mystic art manuals. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment, as she suddenly recalled the strange shadow behind Mu Meiyan. That's right. In Chiwu Pavilion's book depository, there are various ancient mystic art manuals. They have the most complete collection in the entire cultivation world. Mu Meiyan and Yu Hanxin's war of attrition would officially begin 100 years later. Right now, the two of them were accumulating their strength, along with the occasional verbal quarrel. Zhu Yao was completely unable to interfere in these matters. After all, she couldn't possibly come all the way here to stop the fight, right? Furthermore, Zhu Yao had already made sufficient preparations. Hence, in these 100 years, she didn't know what she should do for a moment either. Why not investigate that shadow that gave her a bad feeling? Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment, as she looked towards Chen Ning at the side with an expectant look. Is the information in that whatever book depository is really that complete? Chen Ning hurriedly nodded heavily. As long as it's in this world, the book depository will have it. Especially in the top floor, there are even many hidden techniques in ancient books. Isn't the top floor a place that only master can enter? That Azoth core suddenly muttered. Chen Ning immediately turned around and glared at him, before instantly shutting his mouth. Master is so scary today. For a moment, he was even more curious about the identity of the person next to him. Then let's go. Zhu Yao finally nodded, as she flew towards the direction where that Azoth core practitioner came from earlier. Lord, wait for me. Chen Ning immediately followed after her joyfully. Though, the Azoth core practitioner at the back was stunned by his words. Lord. When did the word Lord appear above Master's head? He had been the manager of Chiwu Pavilion for so many years, how could he not know? Wasn't Chiwu Pavilion opened by Master? The manager indicated that his brain was insufficient. 10th-ranked demonic beasts could transform, and demonic beasts had always had a longer lifespan than human practitioners. However, ascension wasn't easy, hence, many demonic beasts would not easily ascend to the 11th rank before their lifespan ended. Because the 11th rank meant that they had entered the ascension period, an ascension lightning tribulation might descend one day. It would be fine if they could ascend, but if they couldn't, their souls would be scattered. However, the lifespan of a 10th-ranked demonic beast was simply too long. If they stayed in the forest for too long, they would eventually get bored. Chen Ning was a demonic beast that was bored to the point of pain. After he rose to the 10th rank, he transformed and mixed into a human practitioner. He even had a very good business mind, as he opened a shop in a human practitioner's town. Because he was a high-ranked demonic beast, the spiritual grasses, spiritual medicines, rare treasures and whatnot in the forest could be picked by him as he pleased. The other demonic beasts did not dare to have the slightest bit of objection either. Hence, this business naturally grew bigger and bigger. In a short 10,000 years, Chiwu Pavilion had become the largest chain shopping center in the cultivation world. When Zhu Yao arrived at the so-called Chiwu Pavilion, she was shocked. She had thought that it would at most be a place similar to a large supermarket, however, she realized that Chiwu Pavilion was actually referring to an entire street. On the street, there were talismans, mystic tools, herbs, pellets, and even pawn shops. Zhu Yao silently glanced at Chen Ning, and in an instant, she felt as though she was looking at the owner of a fish pond. The entire street was contracted by him. And, from what that Azoth-ranked human practitioner said earlier, this was only a part of the main shop. In the other cultivation markets, there were other branches. Zhu Yao instantly felt a little frenzied. Chen Ning, you're so successful as a beast, have you ever thought about the feelings of humans? The so-called book depository was a small building with 5 floors. The area it occupied wasn't huge, and from afar, it looked very much like an ancient tower. However, when she entered, she realized that it was a completely different world inside. The inside was twice as big as it looked from the outside, and there were bookshelves everywhere. On the shelves, there were small compartments, and all of them were stored jade tablets. Chen Ning passionately introduced every single floor. Usually, the first floor stored various miscellaneous records, the basics of various life skills such as artificing, talismans, and the various mystic arts that could be cultivated from essence to foundation. The second and third floors stored the mystic arts that could be cultivated from foundation to Azoth-ranked practitioners, as well as the recipes for mid-ranked life skills. The fourth floor was where only nascent soul practitioners and above could enter the high-ranked skills section. Hence, the first floor was basically filled with a sea of people, while the second and third floors only had a few people. The fourth floor was even more so, extremely quiet. Most probably, there wouldn't even be 1 or 2 customers in a few years. As for the fifth floor, it was Chen Ning's private place. According to the Azoth-ranked manager who came to receive them, no one had ever entered it before. And now, Chen Ning was actually inviting Zhu Yao to climb up. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at him, and immediately headed to the first floor. What she wanted to find was information regarding that shadow, and not some incredible mystic arts. Usually, when one cultivated to the demigod realm, they would already know all the mystic arts they should know, so naturally, they wouldn't be interested in these things. Furthermore, the things her master left for her, she couldn't even finish reading them, all right? Looking at the densely packed jade tablets, Zhu Yao was very glad that there was still something as useful as divine sense in this world, and she didn't have to read them one by one. Sweeping her divine sense across them, she basically knew a thing or two about the contents engraved in every single jade tablet. Zhu Yao walked back and forth on the first floor, specifically looking for those records of strange objects, or the contents of rumors. However, she was completely unable to find the contents she wanted. She could only head up to the second floor. The books on the second floor were even simpler, other than mystic arts, there were only recipes. Until an hour later, when she had basically scanned through all the jade tablets on the first to fourth floors, she still did not have the slightest bit of information regarding that shadow. "Lord, why don't we head to the fifth floor to take a look?" Chen Ning once again strongly suggested. "That place is filled with the various lost mystic arts that I personally collected. There are also many remnant pages of ancient scrolls and secret records. Furthermore, there's definitely only one of them, and outsiders don't even know about them." Zhu Yao frowned, as she faintly felt that he was a little unreliable. The items here, the higher the floor, the lesser the contents. Especially the fourth floor, there were only a dozen or so jade tablets in total. It could be imagined that there wouldn't be many things on the fifth floor. "Lord, since we're already here, why don't we take a look?" "Then let's take a look." Since they were already here, then Chen Ning joyfully led the way. Only then did Chen Ning happily lead the way at the front. The fifth floor was much smaller compared to the lower floor. It was simply a study room. The difference was, the ones on the lower floors were all jade tablets, while the ones on the upper floors were books or scrolls. However, the books were slightly yellowed. Although they were all protected by formations, they seemed to have existed for a very long time. Every single book here has been painstakingly collected. Chen Ning had a complacent look on his face, as he proudly introduced. Every single book has its own story, and many of them are even brought out from some ancient ruins that have already disappeared. They have already been lost for a very long time, and are extremely precious. Chapter 113. Zhu Yao curiously picked up a book with a blue cover, and on top of it was written a few majestic words, "Strange objects of the 5 provinces." Zhu Yao's eyes shone, as she casually flipped it open, revealing a lifelike drawing of a human body. Her face instantly darkened. "Are you certain?" "Of course." Chen Ning became even more cocky as he stroked those book covers. "These are treasures among treasures, you know. This one as well." Zhu Yao raised the 5 provinces strange objects record. Mama's egg, you think this daddy here can't tell that this is a pornography book just because you changed your avatar? Chen Ning was startled. Earlier, he still had a complacent look, but in an instant, he exploded into a tomato. That wasn't placed here by me. Chen Ning snatched the book from her hands, and covered up. Who placed this in here? It's too unstylish, it's simply an insult to the culture, too much. So much, if you have the guts, don't stuff it into your clothes. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes, turned her head, and continued to look at the other books. She saw a completely pitch-black scroll, and some of the words on it were already blurry. She could faintly see the word Bara. What's this? Zhu Yao curiously picked it up. Most of the books here were either white scrolls or blue ones. Only this scroll was black. Chen Ning patted the 5 provinces strange objects record on his chest. After confirming that he had placed it properly, he glanced at the scroll in her hands. That's an ancient record of events. It doesn't have much use, it merely records some events that happened a long time ago. However, that scroll is made from exquisite jade silk, and is extremely precious. Zhu Yao opened the scroll, and realized that what was recorded inside were not ancient words, but various diagrams. After a closer look, it was a blessed land of celestial mountains. However, there were also various drawings. There were demonic beasts that she had never seen before. Some of these demonic beasts were as big as mountains, while some were as small as snakes and insects. The further she went, the uglier those demonic beasts became. Zhu Yao continued reading with the mood of wondering just how ugly the last one would be, only to realize that the last one was dyed black by ink. The hell, this feeling of seeing the ending right in front of her eyes, only to realize that the author had given up, was simply too awesome. Zhu Yao instantly had the mood to tear this scroll apart. Unfortunately, this scroll was too hard, and it seemed as though it was reinforced by some sort of formation. He did not tear it. She felt a knot in her heart, but the corner of her clothes suddenly tightened. She looked down and found that Yuhan, who had been obediently following her, was nodding her head. It seemed that she was sleepy. Zhu Yao squatted down. She opened her hand to him. Yuing was stunned for a moment. His small face was still wooden, but he quickly reacted. He took a step forward and hugged her neck. Zhu Yao carried him up, and stroked his little head. Sleep. Only then did his little body relax, and he fell into a deep sleep. Zhu Yao sighed. Yuing, this child, was a little too obedient. He did not make a fuss, nor did he say anything. Sometimes, when he was quiet, people would subconsciously forget his existence. Lord, do you still want to look at these? Chen Ning suddenly darted out. He was holding a large pile of ancient scrolls in his hands, and his face was full of flattery. They are all part of my collection. Zhu Yao glanced at his bulging chest. She really did not have much interest in his collection. No need, I have to go. Chen Ning's face instantly collapsed, and he looked at her with a face full of resentment. You really don't want a single one. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She had no choice but to obediently pick up that black ancient scroll from earlier. I'll take this then. Chen Ning's eyes instantly shone, as he nodded. I still have matters to attend to. I'll be leaving first. It wasn't good for demonic beasts to be too passionate. Zhu Yao hugged Yuing tightly, and left Shiwu Pavilion. Flying on her sword, she headed towards Azure Flight. A few minutes later. Why are you following me? Zhu Yao looked at the figure behind her with a headache. Chen Ning loudly replied. This subordinate swears to follow Lord until death. Follow your sister. This daddy here doesn't want a follower. honestly speaking, you're determined to stick to me, right? Zhu Yao did not know to what extent the so-called dragon race's bloodline had affected demonic beasts. Why was it that whenever she released her dragon's might, she would provoke a demonic beast that refused to let go? She couldn't beat him away, and she couldn't scold him. No matter how ugly her words were, he could still chuckle and reply. Lord is right. Tell him to scram. He could really roll on the ground, and then continue to follow her. Zhu Yao had no choice but to have Qin Ning follow her all the way to Azure Flight. In just a few short years, Azure Flight had already completely changed. The place that was destroyed by the group of heretic practitioners to the point that it looked like a wasteland back then, had a completely different scenery now. Although traces of repair could still be seen everywhere, the entire place was emitting out vitality. She did not know if Sesame had sensed her presence, but when Zhu Yao arrived at the mountain peak, all of the 83 little radishes, as well as Yu Yao and Sesame, were already standing in an orderly manner at the plaza in front of the hall, waiting for her. We greet Sect Master. An orderly and clear voice resounded, as they bowed towards her in unison. Good. Zhu Yao waved her hands. She sized up this group of little radishes. No, they could no longer be called little radishes. Evidently, every single one of them had grown up by a size, and the youngest was at least 10 years old. Master. Yu Yao was undoubtedly the happiest one, as she hurriedly walked forward. A white figure flashed, and pounced straight towards Zhu Yao. Mistress, meow, Zhu Yao dodged to the side. With a plop, Sesame's face landed on the ground. Yet, it crawled up without a care, and hugged onto her leg. Mistress, Beastie missed you so much. Scram. Zhu Yao struggled to pull her leg out, yet, she was unable to do so no matter what. The hell, Sesame, do you have to be so cheap every time you appear? Just as Zhu Yao was about to use some forceful methods, Yu Ying, who was in her embrace, suddenly woke up. He rubbed his eyes, and his leg moved, as though he wanted to get down. Zhu Yao subconsciously let go. Hence, with a push of his leg, he directly stepped on Sesame's face. Sesame immediately let go, and while holding onto his face which was imprinted with 2 footprints, he squatted at the side and began to whimper. Well done. Zhu Yao gave little Yuing a thumbs up. However, he simply looked at her blankly, and then, he automatically tugged onto the corner of her robe. Master, these two are. Yu Yao looked at the 2 people behind her, yet, she ignored Elder Sesame's embarrassing actions. That's right, she was already used to it. We will talk about this later. Zhu Yao greeted the little radishes one by one, and casually inspected everyone's homework. Probably because she was present this time, the little radishes fought especially hard. Zhu Yao's trip back to Celestial Indus sect had actually not even lasted for 10 days. Including Wu Song, 5 of them had already built their foundation, and 10 of them were at the 10th level of essence. It seemed like in less than 2 years, more than half of the people here would be able to build their foundation. It seemed like the method of group training was really feasible. Not only was it useful in actual combat, it was extremely useful even in raising cultivation. Although everyone's cultivation rose at different speeds, the difference between the people in the same group was not huge. After Zhu Yao finished inspecting everyone's homework, she casually suggested a few modified plans, and the sky had already darkened. After dispersing everyone, she then called Wu Song and Yu Yao into the main hall. She simply introduced Yu Ying and Qin Ning to the 2 of them. She did not reveal Qin Ning's identity as a demonic beast, and merely briefly mentioned his identity as a merchant. However, this matter naturally could not be hidden from Sesame. He was a demonic beast in the first place, and had long seen through his identity with a single glance. Adding that they were both at the 10th rank, he found him even more unpleasant to the eye. Ever since they were at the plaza earlier, the two of them had been looking at each other for a long time. Zhu Yao could even faintly see the sparks between their gazes. Zhu Yao sighed. Compared to this pair, Wu Song and Yu Yao at the side could basically be said to be as gentle as water, with endless friendship. Especially when they looked at each other from time to time, one was filled with tenderness, while the other was filled with shyness. It could basically poke the eyes of a single dog blind. A single dog, Zhu Yao, silently lowered her head to look at Yuing, who had already fallen asleep in her embrace. Alright, she could barely be considered as a pair. She missed her master so much. You two must be tired as well. You can leave now. Don't come and hurt a single dog with a long-distance one-sided love. Yu Yao, pack up. We will return to Ancient Hill Sect tomorrow. Yu Yao was startled, her face, which was still flushed earlier, instantly paled a little. Wu Song exchanged glances with her, and then stood up. Sect Master, this disciple still has many areas that he does not understand on the path of cultivation, and requires Senior Martial Sister's guidance. Why not? Why not? Zhu Yao chuckled. Why not what? Wu Song did not dare to look at her eyes a little, and after a while, he stuttered. Why not stay for a few more days, so that I can guide the disciples? Zhu Yao glanced at him. The hell, you want to snatch my disciple? How can it be that easy? Azure Flight Sect has just been established, and there are many matters to attend to. I only have this one precious disciple, I can't bear to let her suffer. Master, I'm not afraid of suffering. Yu Yao hurriedly expressed. I will take good care of Senior Martial Sister. Wu Song immediately spoke up as well. How are you going to take care of her? For how long? Zhu Yao continued to ask. Naturally, as long as Senior Martial Sister is willing to stay, I will take care of her. Never leave. Naturally. All right. Zhu Yao heavily patted on his shoulders. I'll leave my disciple to you then. I have high hopes for you, you know. Oh right, prepare a little more betrothal gifts. Wu Song was startled, and only then did he understand what she meant. His face instantly flushed red, and he secretly glanced at Yu Yao. Seeing that her face was even redder than his, he then revealed a silly smile. Master. Yu Yao pretended to be angry, as she glared at her. Yo, you're getting shy again at a time like this. If you have the ability, don't laugh. I'm just speaking the truth. The person Wu Song is going to marry is the daughter of the Ancient Hill Sect Master, you have to at least show some sincerity, right? Master. Little Radish was furious. Alright, we'll talk about this in the future. Zhu Yao curled her lips. At the very least, she had to give Wu Song some time to save up, right? She wondered how ZMO would react when he finds out about this news. Just thinking about it made her a little excited. After that, she handed over the matters that had piled up in the sect for the past few days, and had the two of them arrange Qin Ning's residence. Chapter 114. Sesame's eyes, which was just about to turn around, instantly shone, as suspicious tears welled up in his eyes. Mistress, I knew that you still love me. It's best that you leave. Meow. Sesame had already hugged her thigh with an excited look. After being kicked away, he continued to hug her back. Only when he could no longer see the three of them, did he cry out. Mistress, how can you be so heartless, so heartless? How can you keep other beasts other than Sesame? Who did I keep? You didn't keep that 10th-ranked beast. Keep your sister. Why did he sound as though he was taking in a concubine? Then why did Mistress bring him back? Zhu Yao actually had her own plans for bringing Qin Ning along. It wasn't easy to raise a sect, especially for someone like her who was overflowing with wealth, yet had no money. Although Qin Ning was a demonic beast, who asked him to be rich? Building a good relationship and pulling in some sponsors or whatnot was a pretty good choice too. Hence, the reason for everything was, because I'm poor. Sesame. Get up, I have something to ask you. Sesame's habit of hugging someone's thighs, when could it change? Zhu Yao first cast a deep sleep mystic art on Yuing, and then cast an isolation formation in the Great Hall. Sesame, do you know of any mystic arts or mystic treasures that exist in the form of a shadow? Even Chiwu Pavilion was unable to find any information regarding that shadow. Most probably, even if she returned to Ancient Hill Sect, she wouldn't be able to find anything. Although Sesame was a demonic beast, after all, it descended from the higher realm, so it knew more things. Shadow. Sesame was startled. What kind of shadow? It will possess a human's body, and at first glance, it looks a little like a ghost. Zhu Yao recalled the appearance of that shadow. However, its facial features are not as clear as a ghost's. It's like a human's shadow, and a companion to a human's body. Sesame sensed the cautiousness in her words, and lowered his head to ponder for a moment. I have never heard of a shadow that can appear like this. I have never heard of such a mystic art either. Usually, mystic arts that exist for a long period of time would always focus on concealment. If a human figure were to appear, then the mystic arts would be considered as inferior. What if the other party can't see it? That shadow would often lie next to Mu Meiyan's ears, and it seemed to be communicating with her. However, when someone was speaking, a human's instinctive reaction would subconsciously look towards the speaker. But Mu Meiyan didn't. It seemed that even she couldn't see the black shadow. The others didn't seem to have any reaction, except for her. Could there be some kind of possession spell? Furthermore, the black shadow was extremely vigilant and could even easily detect a soul formation cultivator. That black shadow seems to have some kind of power that I find very strange. Logically speaking, she had paid so much attention at that time. Even a late-stage soul formation cultivator might not be able to see her, but that black shadow did. Furthermore, she was injured just by looking back at her. Sesame suddenly widened its eyes, and its face paled a little. Unless it's someone who has already ascended, Zhu Yao was startled. You're saying someone descended to the lower realm? Sesame nodded. Just as he was about to say something. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind swept past. Zhu Yao felt a chill on her back, and out of reflex, she immediately summoned a defensive barrier. However, he was forced back over 100 feet by a powerful force. Zhu Yao simply felt her chest churning. The strong smell of blood surged up, and she used all her strength to suppress it. A burst of eerie laughter rang out in the room. It was so eerie that even the temperature dropped by several degrees. Who's there? Sesame instantly reverted to his original form, and instantly filled up half of the Great Hall. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find the source of that sudden energy earlier. He couldn't see it. But Zhu Yao could. At the center of the Great Hall, a person was standing there. No, that couldn't be considered a person, it was just a black shadow. That black shadow was like a water ripple, swaying about. However, it was emitting out a chilling aura. Even though she was so far away, she could still feel a hint of coldness seeping into her bones. This was definitely the black shadow that followed beside Mu Meiyan. But why did he appear here? And the moment he arrived, he immediately attacked. Sesame was still swaying about in the Great Hall, attempting to find a target to attack. That black shadow slightly raised his head. Although he couldn't see his expression, Zhu Yao could sense that he was definitely looking at her with a mocking expression. Zhu Yao did not hesitate. She immediately summoned her own sword intent, circulated all the spiritual energy in her body, and attacked the black shadow at the center. The lightning phoenix she summoned carried the pressure of a demigod as it flew over. She was unable to see through this black shadow's strength, so she could only kill it with a single strike. The entire great hall instantly collapsed, and a huge crack appeared where the phoenix passed by. It instantly pierced through that black shadow. However, Zhu Yao was suddenly startled for a moment. She did not feel like she had hit it in the slightest. That black shadow did not have a physical body. What was going on? Ho ho ho. That strange laughter once again resounded. At the place where the black shadow disappeared earlier, a black substance was currently gathering, and it immediately returned to that black shadow. The hell, just what in the world is this? Before Zhu Yao could even recall her own sword intent, that black shadow lightly swayed, and appeared in front of her. Zhu Yao had no choice but to once again raise her defensive barrier, yet, she was completely unable to block his attack. And she just had to carry Yuing in her embrace. She could only turn her body to protect Yuing in time, and was instantly struck on her back by the black shadow. The true energy in her dantian instantly dispersed, and could no longer be gathered. Yuing woke up as well. As though he had sensed the current situation as well, his little face was filled with panic. His little hand touched Zhu Yao's pale face. Ah. Ah. He still couldn't speak. Roar Roar Sesame reacted as well. Guessing the opponent's position, it immediately attacked a few feet in front of Zhu Yao. However, with a wave of the black shadow's hand, it was instantly sent flying. The black shadow was still letting out that strange and horrifying laughter. As though it was curious, it moved closer and sized Zhu Yao up. As I thought, you can see me. Ho 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 ho. Then, I can't let you live. Zhu Yao wanted to stand up again, but with her dantian destroyed, she was completely unable to gather even the slightest bit of mystic energy. She watched as that black shadow once again raised his hand. Zhu Yao even wanted to curse out at him. The hell? Just what kind of grudge do I have against you? Why must I be killed just because I can see you? She could no longer suppress the sweetness in her chest, as she puked out a mouthful of blood. Mama's egg, even if I'm on line 5. 0, this old lady will still spit on your face before I go offline. Zhu Yao believed that with this attack, she would definitely not be able to live. She was not afraid of death, but she did not know if this black shadow was here to kill her, or if he was going to implicate the other people in Azure Flight. If she were to implicate those 80 or so radishes because of this, her conscience would never be able to rest for the rest of her life. Just as the black shadow was about to approach her, and was about to touch her. However, a blinding golden light suddenly emitted out from her bosom, forcing that black shadow to take a few steps back. What's this? That black shadow seemed to be frightened as well. That light, however, grew even brighter, and in an instant, it covered the entire collapsed great hall. Even that black shadow was swallowed by the light as well. Zhu Yao could not help but close her eyes from the piercing light. However, at the moment she lowered her head to look. She saw the glowing object in her bosom. It was the black scroll she took from Qin Ning's place. Under the intense light, Zhu Yao could not help but close her eyes. After a while, she finally recovered. Slowly, she opened her eyes. However, she realized that they had actually changed the map, and had arrived at a foreign place. This seemed to be a deep mountain, and in the surroundings, were towering trees that she had never seen before. They were so tall that they reached the clouds. Sesame. Zhu Yao looked around for a moment, only to realize that it was currently lying at a place not far away from her. Currently adapting to the current light, she slowly stood up. A teleportation formation. A cold and sinister voice resounded. The hell, it's that black shadow again. Why is it everywhere? You won't be able to escape. Today, you must die. The black shadow once again floated up. Earlier, its body, which had dissipated a little due to the golden light, slowly gathered once again. As though it was absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy, its body was becoming more and more corporeal. Raising one of his hands, a faint purple light was currently gathering in his hand. Sesame leaped up as well. Although it could not see the black shadow, it could roughly guess its direction from such an obvious killing intent. However, Zhu Yao could feel the pressure being emitted out from the purple light, causing her to be completely powerless to resist. Even after changing the map, she was still unable to escape the fate of being killed. If she had known, she would have sent Yuing out. This was the first time Zhu Yao felt that her cultivation speed was too slow, to the point where she was completely powerless to resist. Just as the purple light was about to hit her, suddenly, she heard a shrill howl. That howl was extremely loud, and every single howl seemed to be able to pierce through her eardrums. Zhu Yao's ears were ringing from that howl. Out of nowhere, a snake-shaped demonic beast appeared. Opening its gigantic mouth that was filled with sharp teeth, it bit towards the black shadow. Its speed was so fast that it could not be seen. The black shadow did not seem to have guessed that there would be a demonic beast in this place either, as it hurriedly dodged and retreated several meters away. However, a portion of its body was still shattered by that demonic beast. The purple light in the black shadow's hand was coincidentally thrown towards that snake. Before that purple light could even land on that snake-shaped demonic beast, that demonic beast suddenly opened its mouth wide, and swallowed that extremely powerful-looking ball of light. And then, it burped. Zhu Yao and her little companions were all dumbfounded. Even that black shadow was stunned, as though the word unscientific had already appeared on its face. Just what the hell is this demonic beast? Roar! That snake beast once again let out a long howl. As though it was addicted to eating that purple light, it once again began to chase after the black shadow and attack it. The black shadow could only continue to dodge, yet, his mystic arts seemed to be completely ineffective against that demonic beast. It was being chased to the point of jumping up and down. Zhu Yao silently felt that it was time for her to retreat for a moment. Carrying Yuing, she planned to flee. However, she suddenly heard another loud roar. Another demonic beast suddenly flew over from the sky. This demonic beast was terrifyingly huge, and its wings were actually just a white skeleton. Strangely, it was still flying very stably. Most likely, it was attracted by the sounds of battle, as it charged straight towards the direction of the snake beast and the black shadow. The earth quaked and the mountains shook, and the sky was in full swing. Zhu Yao and the other two were the fish in the pond that were affected. They could only dodge the gigantic trees and flying rocks that were knocked down by them in all directions. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.